Chapter 514. The red shadow moved extremely fast, disappearing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. Xian did not chase after it because he could not catch up. For an expert of this level, if the other party did not fight him, he could not do anything to them. Xian gave up on the red shadow and looked at the swordsman woman in front of him. He had to admit that this woman died in a rather sullen manner. Devour. Now that he had the soul-suppressing sword as his dantian, he could directly devour any sword that was of a lower level than the soul-suppressing sword. And this swordsman woman's sword was obviously not of a higher level than the soul-suppressing sword. Xian took the woman's storage ring and looked at the world prison pagoda not far in front of him. At this time the world prison pagoda turned into a black light and flew into his body. Xian was speechless. This world prison pagoda did not want to leave him. It was already relying on him. Xian shook his head and disappeared. Not long after Xian left, the red figure from before showed up in the field again. Looking at Xian leaving in the distance, the red shadow was silent. After a long time, the red shadow said softly, "Divine Martial City." Divine Martial City. Xian came to the gate of Divine Martial City and looked up into the sky. In the sky he saw two statues, a man and a woman. The woman was holding a spear and had a long ponytail, while the man was wearing a green robe and had a sword at his waist. The sword was somewhat familiar. Xian felt that he had seen this sword somewhere before. And at this time a powerful pressure suddenly came from behind him. Xian was shocked and quickly turned around. Not far in front of him a black dragon swooped down from the sky. And on the dragon sat a man in embroidered robes. The black dragon swooped down without the slightest intention of stopping, and Xian also had no intention of leaving. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Xian. The middle-aged man punched upwards. Rumble. The huge dragon was forced to stop in the air. The enormous dragon was instantly infuriated, and it roared at the middle-aged man. Moreover, it was about to swoop down once more. Meanwhile, the man in embroidered clothes suddenly patted the enormous dragon lightly, and the latter instantly stopped. However, it still glared angrily at the middle-aged man below. The man in embroidered clothes flew down from the dragon and walked in front of the middle-aged man. He smiled and said, "Why did you attack me?" The middle-aged man looked at the man in embroidered robes. "This is the Divine Martial City." The man in embroidered clothes spread his hands and said innocently, "I didn't do anything." The middle-aged man walked to the front of the man in embroidered clothes and said softly, "On account of your father, I'll give you a piece of advice. Keep a low profile." With that he turned around and left. Behind the middle-aged man, the man in embroidered robes laughed. "Low profile? I also want to keep a low profile. It's a pity that my strength doesn't allow it." As he spoke, he looked towards the Divine Martial City. "Divine Martial City, I Xianxia am here. Tremble." At the side, Xian shook his head and turned to walk towards the Divine Martial City. At this moment, the man in embroidered clothes called Xianxia suddenly appeared in front of Xian. Looking at Xian, the corners of Xianxia's mouth curled up. "Weren't you afraid just now?" Xian thought for a moment and then he said, "Very afraid." Xianxia's eyes narrowed. "Why didn't you run if you were afraid?" Xian said, "I was too nervous and forgot." Xianxian was stunned and then he laughed. He patted Xian's shoulder. "I'm still lacking an underling. You can be my underling." Xian was speechless. Xianxian said indifferently, "What? You're not willing?" Xian shook his head. Are there any benefits?" "Benefits?" Xianxian sized up Xian. "I'll take you as my underling." "You want benefits from being my underling?" Xian said seriously, "Of course. Wouldn't it be too shameful if there are no benefits? Also, you don't have any prestige." Xianxian thought for a moment and then he said, "What you said makes sense. What benefits do you want?" Xian said, "Big brother, just give it to me as you see fit." Xianxian pointed with his finger and a storage ring landed in front of Xian. Xian glanced at it. There were 1,000,000 purple origin crystals in the storage ring. He had to say that this was very generous. Xianxian patted Xian's shoulder and laughed. "From now on you are my underling. If you are bullied in Divine Martial City in the future, just say my name." With that he turned and flew into Divine Martial City. In the same spot Xian nodded. "I will definitely say your name." With that he also entered Divine Martial City. Divine Martial City was very prosperous, and Yi Xian discovered that there were many swordsmen here. There were many swordsmen out of every 10 people on the streets, and they were all very strong. Yi Xian was suddenly curious about the sword sect. After asking around, Yi Xian walked towards the sword sect. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at the foot of the sword sect's mountain. There were many people coming and going at the foot of the sword sect's mountain, and they were all swordsmen. Sword Dao. All these years he had been developing his sword Dao on his own, and he rarely received pointers from others. Therefore he was very much looking forward to joining a swordsman sect. If there was someone to guide him, he would definitely be able to avoid many detours on the path of the sword. Yi Xian walked up the mountain. When he came to the stone steps below the giant sword, an old man with a long sword on his back stopped him. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. "Do you want to join my sword sect?" Yi Xian nodded. The old man pointed to the right. "If you want to join my sword sect, you must first pass the trial." Yi Xian looked to the right. A few dozen feet away there was a huge round platform. A young swordsman was standing on top of the round platform and he seemed to be testing something. Yi Xian nodded and came to the bottom of the round platform. He looked up and saw that the young swordsman was fighting with a wooden puppet. Seeing this wooden puppet, Yi Xian was stunned. Because this wooden puppet was exactly the same as the wooden puppet in his world prison pagoda. However, other than the same appearance, the difference in strength was like heaven and earth. The wooden puppet in his body, he was no match for it in a head-on fight. At this moment, the young man on the round platform suddenly retreated. When he reached the edge of the round platform, he turned around and slashed at the wooden puppet's waist at a strange angle. Bang! The wooden puppet retreated again and again. At this time, an old man on the platform glanced at the young man. "Pass." The young man's expression relaxed and he couldn't help but smile. He bowed to the old man and left. Seeing this, many people had a trace of envy in their eyes. The sword sect. This was the strongest swordsman sect. As long as one joined it, not only would they have cultivation resources, they would also have a powerful backer. In this world where the strong were respected, a backer was very important. Soon one swordsman after another went up the platform. Some failed, some succeeded. About an hour later, Yi Xian walked up the round platform. The old man next to him glanced at Yi Xian. "Shall we begin?" Yi Xian nodded. Yi Xian had just nodded when the wooden puppet in front of him suddenly charged at him. However, everyone was stunned in the next moment. Because a sword had suddenly been pressed against the wooden puppet's forehead. Everyone looked at Yi Xian one after another. At this moment, the old man's expression had become slightly solemn. Because he actually hadn't been able to see how Yi Xian had attacked just now. Damn! What a swift sword! Yi Xian gestured with his right hand and the sword flew back to him. After that he gazed at the old man. The old man remained silent for a moment before he said, "Come with me." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian followed him. Everyone in the surroundings looked at each other. High profile. Yi Xian hadn't intended to conceal his strength when he came to the sword sect this time. Because he was very well aware that it wouldn't be long before the higher-ups of the sword sect would find out about him. Moreover, he was very well aware that the stronger he revealed his strength, the more attention the sword sect would place on him. It didn't take long for the old man to lead Yi Xian to a hall, and then the old man bowed slightly. A short moment later, a voice resounded from within the hall. "Come in." The old man gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian nodded slightly and walked in. The hall was very spacious and there was only a single middle-aged man here. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian. He said that "You're very outstanding. Prove it to me." Yi Xian nodded and then he looked up at the middle-aged man. A moment later, two flying swords silently appeared on both sides of the middle-aged man. Meanwhile, a sword suddenly appeared in the middle-aged man's hand, and then he swung it to his left and right, causing Yi Xian's swords to be blasted flying. But right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the middle-aged man, and then he suddenly slashed his sword down towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man raised his sword to block. Bang! As soon as Yi Xian's sword slashed down, the middle-aged man instantly retreated explosively, but he quickly stopped himself. As soon as he did, two flying swords suddenly appeared behind him. The middle-aged man's expression changed slightly, and then he turned around and shot out a wave of swords. Bang! Both of Yi Xian's flying swords were blasted flying. On the other hand, Yi Xian didn't attack again. If he continued, then the middle-aged man would lose. He wanted to prove himself to the sword sect and he didn't want to offend them. The middle-aged man sheathed his swords, and then he gazed at Yi Xian with a trace of seriousness in his eyes. Your flying swords are really swift. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Thank you for your compliment, senior. Seeing Yi Xian's bow, the middle-aged man secretly nodded in his heart, and then his eyes became slightly softer. You're very strong and I have nothing to teach you. Speaking until here, he slightly paused. Come with me. After saying that, he walked out of the hall. Yi Xian hurried to follow him. The middle-aged man brought Yi Xian to the peak of a mountain behind the sect. At the peak of the mountain there was a thatched hut, and in front of the hut was a vegetable garden. In the garden an old man was planting vegetables. An expert. This was Yi Xian's first impression of the old man when he saw him. Anyone who sweeps and grows vegetables like this must be a peerless expert. The middle-aged man brought Yi Xian to the old man, and the middle-aged man bowed slightly. Old too, is young martial uncle here? The old man put down the things in his hand and then shook his head. I don't know where he went. Why, is there something? The middle-aged man nodded and he glanced at Yi Xian. A young lad appeared and he's not bad. I want to recommend him to young martial uncle. Old Tu looked at Yi Xian and then he sized up Yi Xian. Let him wait here. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Then he looked at Yi Xian. Wait here for a moment. Junior Master's swordsmanship is unparalleled. If you can become his disciple, it will be very beneficial for your swordsmanship to improve. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The middle-aged man turned and left. Yi Xian walked to Old Tu. Greetings, senior. Old Tu said indifferently. Don't flatter me, I'm just an ordinary vegetable farmer. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 5:15. A vegetable farmer? Yi Xian definitely did not believe it. This kind of old man was usually a peerless expert. Yi Xian chuckled. Senior, is that junior martial uncle powerful? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. Don't worry, he is definitely stronger than you. Yi Xian said indifferently. Really? The old man sized up Yi Xian. Young man, you are so arrogant. Yi Xian shook his head. No. I just want to become stronger. It was not that he was arrogant, but his sword attainment had reached a bottleneck. It was very difficult to improve further. It was the same for sword skills. What he desired now was to know his own shortcomings. The old man put down the things in his hand and looked at Yi Xian. You think you are very strong now? Yi Xian looked at the old man. Senior, please enlighten me. The old man shook his head. I am just a vegetable farmer. With that he continued to grow vegetables. Yi Xian did not insist and walked to the side. Wait. He now hoped that junior martial uncle was strong enough. In terms of realm, he did not want to improve for now because he had not fully digested this realm. He only wanted to improve his sword path. In other words, he wanted to see other sword path experts. The stronger the better. Of course, he could not be as strong as the plain-dressed woman. Not long after, a woman appeared in front of Yi Xian. The person was Lian Wanli. After entering Shenwu City, he took the initiative to contact Lian Wanli and the others. Lian Wanli sized up Yi Xian. You've become stronger? Yi Xian smiled. He looked behind Lian Wanli and asked, Where are they? Lian Wanli's lips curled up. Is it not enough for me? Yi Xian smiled and changed the topic. Miss Lian, you have been in Shenwu City for some time. How do you feel? Lian Wanli's smile gradually disappeared. Yi Xian asked softly, What's wrong? Lian Wanli smiled. There are many monsters in this place. A lot? Yi Xian was startled for a moment before he smiled and said, Isn't that good? Lian Wanli said softly, Only now does this king truly understand what it means by there is always someone better out there. Yi Xian nodded. In the past he felt that he had few opponents in the younger generation. However, after encountering Wuxia, he discovered that there were people in the younger generation that weren't any weaker than him. The monstrous geniuses of the divine martial city were definitely not weaker than him and Wuxia. Of course, this was a good thing for him. True experts were never afraid of their opponents being strong. What they were afraid of was their opponents not being strong enough. Just like at this moment, if someone of the same age defeated him in the sword Dao, then he would be happy instead. As long as he was not defeated, he would not know his own shortcomings. At this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly said, This king is going to fight. With that she turned around and left. At this moment Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Where are Ling Er and the rest?" Lian Wanli didn't even turn his head. "They are busy and can't come for the time being. When you're done here, come to Wun to find them." As her voice faded, she had already disappeared at the end of the horizon. Ping. Yi Xian nodded slightly. At this moment the old man not far away suddenly said, "Now that you have joined the sword sect, it's best that you don't go to Wun." Yi Xian looked at the old man puzzled. "Why?" The old man said lightly, "If you go to Wun you will be beaten." Yi Xian slightly frowned. "This sword sect and Wun are enemies?" The old man shook his head. "Not exactly enemies, but there is competition. Many years ago it was a healthy competition, but gradually, it has changed. In any case, those people from Jaha Street in Wuyun feel that swordsman is not as good as them, while we feel that they are not as good as our swordsmen. Both sides have a competition every year, and gradually the relationship between both sides is getting worse." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Ling Er and Lanxiu and Lian Wanli are in Wuyuan, and Lian Wanli is in Wuyuan. Should I go to Wuyuan?" As if knowing what Yi Xian was thinking, the old man suddenly said, "Kid, don't tell me you want to go to Wuyuan?" Yi Xian thought for a while, then nodded. "My sister is in Wuyuan, and so are my friends in Wuyuan." Speaking of this, he decided to go to Wuyuan. He did not want to have a hostile relationship with his sister and Lanxiu and the others in the future. What sword or not, his sister is the boss. Thinking of this, Yi Xian turned around and left. To Wuyuan. At this moment the old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was shocked. This old man is so fast. The old man stared at Yi Xian. "You're a member of the sword sect now." Yi Xian said, "Senior, I haven't joined the sword sect yet, right?" The old man suddenly slapped Yi Xian's shoulder, and a small black mark appeared on his shoulder. "Sword." The old man said indifferently, "You are now." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Senior, are you forcing me to join?" The old man said coldly, "What? Is it wrong for you to join my sword sect?" Yi Xian said, "That's not it. It's just that my sister is in Wuyuan, so I want to go to Wuyuan. I hope Senior can fulfill my wish." The old man shook his head. "You're a member of my sword sect now. If you go to Wuyuan, then not only will they not accept you, they will look down on you instead. Think about it." Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile the old man said, "Don't worry. The sword sect won't treat you unfairly." Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and said, "Senior, I'm afraid you won't be able to stop me if I want to leave." The old man spoke indifferently, "Is that so?" Yi Xian smiled and then he vanished in the next moment. At the instant that Yi Xian vanished, the old man kicked lightly with his right foot, and a branch in front of him suddenly transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. Over 1 kilometer away. Bang! A rumbling sound suddenly rang out. Then a figure fell from the sky. It was Yi Xian. Yi Xian turned around to look at the old man. The old man took a step forward, and he'd arrived in front of Yi Xian as soon as his foot descended. Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn when he witnessed this scene. This old man really isn't an ordinary person. The old man sized up Yi Xian. "Shall we attack?" Yi Xian nodded, and then 2 rays of light slashed down towards the old man. However, the rays of light had just arrived in front of the old man when they stopped because the old man's fingers had clamped down on them. Yi Xian's heart shook because the old man was much stronger than he'd imagined. The old man clamped down lightly and the rays of light collapsed into pieces. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Senior, you're so strong." The old man spoke indifferently, "Come on, continue." Yi Xian shook his head, "I can't defeat you." The old man's strength was definitely superior to the wooden figure within his body. The old man was able to clamp down on his flying swords with his fingers. Such strength was enough to crush him. The old man glanced coldly at Yi Xian. "Young man, you're acting arrogant just because you have some strength. You don't know your own limits." Yi Xian nodded repeatedly. Yes, you're always right." The old man sneered, "Look at you. You're not convinced?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I'm not really convinced." The old man was so angry that he started laughing. "Come, this time the old man will let you use one hand. If you can make the old man take half a step back, then the old man will recognize you as his master." Half a step. Yi Xian suddenly slashed forward. The old man laughed coldly and flicked his sleeve. With this swing, Yi Xian's ray of light instantly collapsed. But right at this moment, 2 rays of light suddenly appeared on the left and right of the old man. The old man was expressionless as he waved his right hand, and in the blink of an eye, those two rays of light collapsed. He looked at Xian and was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. Illusion. As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot lightly, and an expanse of rays of light surged out from beneath his feet. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded here, and then a ray of light collapsed soundlessly in front of him. The old man gazed at Xian and he was about to speak when his expression changed once more. It's an illusion again. As soon as he finished speaking, he pressed his fingers together and flicked them lightly. The space in front of him was directly torn apart, but in an instant the space was restored. The old man glanced at the surroundings and frowned slightly. It's an illusion again. As he spoke, he took a step back, and then a ray of light silently arrived before him. The old man raised his palm and smashed it down. Rumble. The space in the surroundings suddenly collapsed into pieces. But it instantly returned to normal. The old man raised his head to gaze at Xian. At this moment, a wisp of blood was slowly seeping out from the corner of Xian's mouth. Xian had an extremely solemn expression on his face. The old man had dealt with all three levels of the illusion. The old man stared at Xian. You've combined an illusion with the sword Dao. Xian spoke solemnly. Senior, how did you notice that it was a three-level illusion? The old man spoke coldly. As a swordsman, how could an old man be considered a swordsman if he was bewitched by an illusion? A swordsman. Xian laughed bitterly. Indeed, a swordsman who'd attained the enlightened state of mind were innately able to counter illusions. Wait. Xian seemed to have thought of something and he gazed at the old man. Senior, tell me the truth. How many people in the sword sect can disregard my illusions? The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, No more than 4. No more than 4. Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. If even a swordsman could deal with the illusion, then wouldn't the Tao of Dreams be too degrading? The old man sized up Xian. Your flying sword coupled with your illusion. Xian hurriedly said, Isn't it very powerful? The old man's face remained expressionless. Very bad. Xian's face froze. The old man spoke coldly. You're not convinced? Xian nodded. I'm not convinced. The old man said, Do you know where you're lacking? Xian shook his head. The old man said, It's your sword. Xian spoke solemnly. Please enlighten me, senior. The old man walked over to Xian. The strength and speed of your sword have practically reached your current limits. I have to say it's very surprising. However, you've placed too much emphasis on strength and speed and you've neglected something important. Xian asked, What is it? The old man spoke softly. Intent. As he spoke, he looked at Xian. My speed and strength might not necessarily be faster than yours, but my intent is far above yours. So, no matter how strong your speed and strength are, they're not much of a threat to me. Unless you've reached that kind of absolute strength, and this also requires the support of intent. Xian fell silent for a moment and then he said, Please enlighten me, senior. The old man nodded slightly and he pointed to the vegetable garden in the distance. Go and plant the old man's vegetables first. Xian turned around and left. Looking at Xian's back, the old man's expression relaxed and he muttered in his heart, Fortunately, I've fooled this guy. P.S. I'm going to spend my own money to print a few physical books about the invincible sword domain and the only sword. Is anyone interested in this? Chapter 5:16. Grow vegetables. Xian really started to grow vegetables. Excitement. At this moment, Xian was very excited because he finally knew where he was lacking. Power. Speed. He had indeed reached his current limit in these two aspects. However, as the old man had said, he was still a beginner in the aspect of intent. On the other side, the old man glanced at Xian feeling a little shocked. Xian's strength was a little beyond his expectations. Especially with that illusion and Xian's flying sword, he could almost instantly kill a manifestation realm cultivator. If he used it for a sneak attack, the effect would be even better. He was a good seedling. The old man nodded inwardly. The only thing that dissatisfied him was Xian's character. He was too stubborn and a little slippery. This was not a bad thing for Sword Dao, but it was not a good thing for the sword sect. Trouble. From the first time he saw Xian, he knew that this was definitely a troublemaker. At this moment, Xian suddenly said, Senior, I have a problem. The old man looked at Xian. What problem? Yi Xian said seriously, you just took a step back. The old man, Yi Xian was about to speak when the old man suddenly said, what? Do you have a problem? If you have a problem, let's continue to fight. The kind where life and death are decided. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. This old man was too shameless. At this moment inside the world prison pagoda, the emperor dog suddenly laughed. Finally, there's someone more shameless than you. Yi Xian, the old man walked in front of Yi Xian. Do you have any more problems? Yi Xian hurriedly shook his head. Oh no, no problem. The old man snorted coldly. Then what are you waiting for? Yi Xian asked. After I'm done, can Senior teach me? The old man said angrily, what's with all this nonsense? Hurry up. Yi Xian quickly nodded. Hey. As he spoke, he seemed to have thought of something and hesitated. The old man frowned. What's wrong with you now? Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. Senior, there's something you don't know. Actually, the true reason I wanted to leave the sword sect earlier was because I had some enemies before I came here. They coveted the treasures in my possession. I was afraid I'd implicate the sword sect. Enemy. The old man sized up Yi Xian. I think it's normal for you to have enemies, but you can't even deal with those enemies. Yi Xian nodded. I can't. They have too many people. I can't beat them. The old man said coldly, don't worry, you're in the sword sect now and you're with me. No matter who your enemies are, this old man will block them for you. Yi Xian sighed again. Senior, you may not know this, but my enemies are all very powerful. Senior, the old man said angrily. Old man said I will block them for you, so I will. Why are you acting like a woman? Yi Xian quickly said, Okay, I will block them for you. After saying that, he began to plant vegetables. Needless to say, he was quite good at growing vegetables because he had done all kinds of chores in the Yi family. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, in this all-heaven starfield, when has our sword sect been afraid of anyone? If your enemies are smart, they'd better not come to Divine Martial City. If they dare to come, old man will crush them with one hand. Yi Xian quickly said, Yes, Senior can crush them with one hand. The old man said, plant vegetables well, old man will go out for a while. After saying that, he turned around and left. After the old man left, Yi Xian sat on the ground. Brother the Archhound, how strong was that old man? The Archhound was silent. This chapter is not over. Please continue. After a while he said softly, Unfathomable. Unfathomable. Yi Xian nodded slightly. The old man could catch his flying sword with his fingers. His strength could only be described as terrifying. Yi Xian looked around. He had to admit that the sword sect was indeed full of hidden talents. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian's face gradually darkened. Planet Lord. He was the mastermind behind the attack on the never-ending starfield. The Planet Lord would definitely not let him go. Some of the people who came to kill him must have been sent by the Planet Lord. Become stronger. This time he did not want to be passive anymore. At this moment the old man who had left earlier returned. The old man flicked his finger and a token landed in front of Yi Xian. From now on, you are officially a disciple of the sword sect. Yi Xian. The old man sat on a wooden stool in front of Yi Xian. There is competition within the sect, but only healthy competition is allowed. If you are strong, you can even be the sect master. Saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. Remember, if a sect is not united, it will not be long before it is destroyed. You are a disciple of the sword sect now. You have the responsibility to maintain the unity of the sword sect, understand? Yi Xian shook his head. As long as others do not target me, I promise I will not cause trouble. Of course, if anyone wants me dead or plays dirty, I will definitely kill them. The old man looked at Yi Xian, but Yi Xian was not afraid. Return good for evil? No. Yi Xian likes to return good for good and evil for evil. The old man shook his head. You have a vicious aura and it is not a good thing for you. Yi Xian was silent. The old man continued, besides that, your sword has a fatal weakness. Yi Xian said, Please enlighten me, Senior. The old man said, the sword is indeed about speed and power. In this aspect, you can be said to be one of the best among the younger generation of the sword sect. However, the sword is not only about speed and power. Your current speed and power belong to the form style sect. Form style? Yi Xian frowned. What do you mean? The old man said, above the manifestation realm are the Dao realm experts. The so-called Dao realm experts are those who comprehend the Dao. As for the Dao, I can't explain it to you clearly. At this point he paused for a moment before continuing. In this starfield the experts are divided into 3 types. The first is the consciousness style, the second is the realm style, and the third is the form style. Xian asked, form style? What do you mean? The old man looked at Xian. Right now you belong to the formality style because you focus on strength and speed. However, your strength and speed have only reached your own limit, not the limit of this world. Xian said in a deep voice. In other words, I can be faster, right? The old man nodded. However, it will be very difficult for you to improve further. Xian bowed respectfully. Senior, please teach me. The old man was silent for a moment before continuing. You want to focus on the form style? Xian shook his head. I want to learn the consciousness style. The old man looked at Xian. You are very ambitious. However, if you focus on form style, you will be at a disadvantage when you encounter the consciousness style. Xian asked, Senior, which of these 3 styles is stronger? The old man shook his head. It depends on the person. Go. I will take you to see an old man. After saying that, he stood up. However, as if he thought of something, he looked at Xian. Kid, I don't know much about your character, but the old man thinks that you are a good seedling and worth cultivating. However, I don't want the old man to cultivate a scourge for the sword sect. After a moment of silence, Xian smiled. Senior, I have killed a lot of people, but I never take the initiative to kill people. Of course, I know what you are worried about. How about this? I promise that I will not compete for the sword sect's sect leader's position. The old man said angrily, if you have the strength, why don't you compete? This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Are you going to let those good-for-nothings take the position? Xian, the old man sighed in a low voice. Kid, it is not that the old man is being unreasonable. The main thing is that many times, a sect often perishes because of internal strife. Kid, you are talented. If you mess around in the sword sect in the future. Xian smiled. Senior, I won't mess around. Really? The old man shook his head. The more you say that, the more I panic. Xian, the old man said, let's go. I will take you to see a real superform style expert. After saying that, he turned and disappeared not far away. Xian hurriedly followed. On the way, the emperor hound in the prison pagoda suddenly said, Kid, you will definitely mess around. Xian's face darkened. Brother emperor hound, what do you mean? The monarch hound said, Kid, think about it. Have you been messing around everywhere you go? Xian. Soon the old man brought Xian to a blacksmith's forge in Divine Martial City. In front of the blacksmith's forge, a burly man was madly hammering the weapon in his hand. Seeing the old man, the burly man sneered. Yo, what wind blew you here? The old man walked to the front of the blacksmith's forge, then looked at Xian. Apprentice. Xian was taken aback. Then he hurriedly bowed to the burly man. Disciple Xian greets master. The burly man was dumbfounded. At this time the old man said, Blacksmith Chen, don't say this old man is not sincere. This time I found a good seedling, so I specially brought him for you to take a look. He is really good, absolutely a rare sight. Xian, Blacksmith Chen glanced at the old man. Old lunatic, when did your skin become so thick? The old man said in a deep voice, Old Chen, I know you will be leaving soon. Don't you want to leave your life's work here? Blacksmith Chen shook his head. Oh. Saying so, he continued to forge. The old man said coldly, Let's go. Saying so, he turned and left. Xian hesitated for a moment, then hurriedly followed. At this time the old man stopped and turned to Blacksmith Chen. Hit him. Xian was stunned. The old man looked at Xian. Hit him. Hit him to death. Without any hesitation, Xian turned his head to look at Blacksmith Chen. In the next moment, 2 flying swords suddenly appeared in front of Blacksmith Chen. However, the 2 flying swords disappeared without a trace as soon as they arrived in front of the blacksmith. At the same time, Xian's expression changed drastically. He drew his sword and slashed. The sword slashed down, cutting through the air. In the distance, a strand of hair appeared in the blacksmith's hand. The blacksmith glanced at Xian and let go of his fingers. The strand of hair slowly fell. Xian was silent. At this time the blacksmith's expression suddenly changed. He didn't make a move, but the surrounding space suddenly collapsed. However, it returned to normal in an instant. At this time, a sword was pressed a few inches between the blacksmith's eyebrows. The sword couldn't move even half a step forward, because the blacksmith's fingers had caught Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, the blacksmith sized up Yi Xian seriously. The combination of illusion and swordsmanship. Saying so, he shook his head. I won't accept you because I've already met someone better than you. Saying so, he turned and continued to forge. The old man gave Yi Xian a look. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Senior, let's go. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. I desire to become stronger, but I will never beg others. Saying so, he glanced at the blacksmith not far away. Give me 1 year and I will definitely not be worse than anyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 5:17. Beg. Yi Xian wanted to become stronger, but as he said, he would not beg the other party. No matter how strong the other party was, he would not beg the other party. Compared to becoming stronger, he felt that dignity was more important. If the other party thought highly of him, then it was naturally good and he would respect the other party. But if the other party did not think highly of him, then it was fine. In the end, people still had to rely on themselves. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the old man's eyes flashed with admiration. Let's go. Then he turned and left. Yi Xian followed. The two left in a carefree manner. Not far away, the blacksmith glanced at Yi Xian and the old man, but did not say anything. At this moment, a young man walked over. The young man looked at Yi Xian and the old man. Master, they are? The blacksmith said in a deep voice. Remember that young man, he might be your greatest opponent. Hearing this, the young man was stunned, then turned to look into the distance. Yi Xian followed the old man back to the sword sect. On the peak of the mountain, the old man sat opposite Yi Xian. That person just now is called Blacksmith Chen. He is one of the top masters of formality in this divine martial arts city. No, I should say this star field. He is only in the rebirth state, but his speed and strength far surpass some Dao state experts. Even I am far inferior to him in terms of strength and speed. Saying this, he looked at Yi Xian. If you learn from him, you will definitely benefit greatly. Yi Xian smiled. It's okay, then I will first learn the flow of consciousness from Senior. The old man nodded. You did not use your full strength when you fought with me, right? Yi Xian nodded. The old man said, how much did you keep? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, 50%. Whether it was against the old man or Blacksmith Chen, he did not use his full strength. After all, he still had the Divine King's Throne, soul-suppressing sword, and Divine King's sword that he had not used. If it was a battle of life and death, he would have a fighting chance if he used these 3 treasures. The old man took a deep look at Yi Xian. Boy, you're not an ordinary person. This old man doesn't want to investigate your background. All you need to know is that you're a disciple of the sword sect. Yi Xian nodded. I, Yi Xian, am not an ingrate, nor am I an ungrateful person. The old man smiled and said, this is enough. As he spoke, he stood up. I have nothing to teach you with your current speed and strength. Now I will teach you sword intent and conception. Let's start with sword intent. Come, release your sword intent. Yi Xian nodded and then he released his sword intent. It didn't take long for his good and evil sword intent to appear. Seeing the good and evil sword intents, the old man frowned. Your sword intents? 2 sword intents? Yi Xian nodded. Well, Amos said softly, that's quite rare. How do you usually use this sword intent? How do I use this sword intent? Yi Xian was stunned. How did I use it in the past? It seemed like I just used sword chi. At this moment, the old man suddenly spoke. Sword Dao, sword Dao. Actually, sword intent and intents are extremely important, especially your sword intent. Your sword intent represents your sword Dao, and if you can develop it, its might will be extremely terrifying. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, how do I develop it? Amos said, sword Dao faith. Your sword intent is your sword Dao faith. Yi Xian shook his head. I still don't understand. The old man suddenly put his fingers together, and a sword chi appeared on his fingertip. Yi Xian looked at the old man's sword chi. In the next moment, the sword chi suddenly flew out at an extremely fast speed. He could only see a blurry figure. The speed of this sword was almost the same as his flying sword. Amos said, this is the normal speed of my sword. Look again. As he spoke, he gently pulled his fingers together, and a sword chi appeared on his fingertip. In the next moment he pointed his fingers forward. The sword flew out. The speed of this sword was not much faster than before, but there was an additional indescribable thing. Sword intent. These two words suddenly popped up in Yi Xian's mind. He looked at the old man and the latter nodded slightly. Sword intent. With the sword intent, this sword would have a life of its own. Life. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Senior, what do you mean? The old man looked at Yi Xian. Swordsman, we not only cultivate the heart but also the sword. And the sword can understand the human mind, but your current sword is very dead, they do not have their own soul. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. High-level swords, they have sword spirits, then. The old man interrupted Yi Xian's words. In the hands of a real swordsman, the most powerful sword is no different from an ordinary branch. Moreover, can you really use the power of a high-level sword in your hands? Yi Xian was silent. He currently had the soul-suppressing sword and the divine king sword in his hands. And right now he really could not unleash the true power of the soul-suppressing sword. The old man continued, the strongest thing about a swordsman is that he can give life to the sword, and the most powerful thing about a sword is that it is extraordinary because of the person. As he said that, he waved his right hand and a wooden branch landed in front of Yi Xian. Come, take this wooden branch. Yi Xian picked up the wooden branch. The old man said, in your hands this wooden branch is just a wooden branch. Of course, with your speed and strength, this wooden branch can also become very powerful, but it is still a wooden branch. Do you understand what I mean? Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then nodded. I understand. He now truly understood. Sword. Extraordinary because of the person. No matter what sword it was, whether it was strong or not depended entirely on its master. Just like the wooden branch in his hand, if it was in the hands of the plainly dressed woman, then no peerless divine sword could compare to it. But in his hands, it was just a wooden branch. Why? Because of the difference in strength? It was actually the difference in the attainment of the sword principle, and this attainment, to put it simply, was the concept of the sword principle. All these years he had focused on the speed and strength of the sword and neglected this point. Sword intent. Yi Xian looked at the wooden branch in his hand and soon his good and evil sword intent appeared on the wooden branch. The old man said again, remember, it doesn't mean that when your sword intent covers the wooden branch it will have a soul. Sword intent, using intent to nurture the sword is the right way. You can slowly understand the rest. With that he turned around and left. In the field, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, holding the wooden branch in his hand, and the good and evil sword intent covered his surroundings. Enlightenment. What he needed to do now was enlightenment and properly enlightenment. After the old man left, he came to the sky-gazing mountain of the sword sect. This was the tallest mountain in the sword sect and also the core of the sword sect. In front of the sky-gazer palace stood a statue. The statue was of a young man. The young man had a sword hanging from his waist and there was a little fellow sitting on his shoulder. The old man came to the statue, bowed slightly and walked into the sky-gazing palace behind the statue. As soon as he entered the palace, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared. This person was the sword sect's current sword sect leader, Li Xianfeng. Li Xianfeng glanced at the old man and smiled. Martial uncle, I heard you accepted a disciple. The old man said indifferently, why can't I? Li Xianfeng shook his head. Of course not, but martial uncle, if you accept him as a disciple, wouldn't he be in the same generation as us? The old man said coldly, can't I? Li Xianfeng smiled bitterly. The old man sat aside and said, that kid is not bad or I wouldn't have accepted him. Li Xianfeng nodded. Someone that can catch martial uncles, I must not be bad. The old man looked straight at Li Xianfeng. Are you monitoring him? Li Xianfeng was silent. The old man asked, why? Li Xianfeng said in a deep voice, martial uncle, this person is not simple. He comes from the never-ending star sector and has that treasure. The old man frowned. Which treasure? Li Xianfeng said, the treasure ranked first on the interstellar bounty list. Hearing this, the old man's frown deepened. Li Xianfeng said softly, that treasure. Rumor has it that it isn't a fourth dimension item. The person who obtains it can use it to enter the fifth dimension. The old man looked at Li Xianfeng. You want that item too? Li Xianfeng was silent. The old man said in a deep voice, you don't even understand the fourth dimension. What are you going to do in the fifth dimension? To die. Li Xianfeng smiled bitterly. Martial uncle, this is an opportunity for us. The old man said, what opportunity? Li Xianfeng said softly, our sword sect has been in this Xinwu city for too long. The old man shook his head and sighed, you are the same as your master, too ambitious. But you and your master still remember what the ancestral master said back then? It is precisely because of this that our sword sect does not participate in worldly affairs, that no matter how the all-heaven starfield changes, our sword sect will still exist. Li Xianfeng said, Martial uncle, the times are different now. Look at the Star Lord outside. He was only the leader of a small faction back then, but now he is the leader of the all-heaven star sector. Their influence is far beyond our sword sect. The old man said, so what? Do they dare to offend our sword sect? Li Xianfeng shook his head. Martial uncle, my master and I hope to make the sword sect famous throughout the all-heaven star sector and revitalize our swordsman sect. The old man shook his head. The sword sect is under your control now. The old man doesn't want to say anything more. But that kid is now my disciple. You and your master better not have any ideas about him. Then he turned around and left. Li Xianfeng suddenly said, Martial uncle, some mysterious experts have appeared around the divine martial city. They are all here for him. The old man didn't turn around. You can ignore the sword sect. With that he disappeared from the palace. Li Xianfeng fell silent for a moment, then walked out of the palace and arrived before the statue in front of the palace. As he looked at the statue, his gaze gradually turned cold. On the summit of the mountain, Xian sat there for 4 hours. For the past 4 hours, his sword intent had been covering the branch in his hand. Sword intent. He had already determined his way of the sword in the past, but he never took another step forward in his way of the sword. Why was the sword extraordinary? Because of its user. Xian looked at the branch in his hand and fell into deep thought. At that moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Xian's mind. The sword is like a fish. Without water, the fish is dead. Hearing that voice, Xian's expression changed greatly. Who is it? In the next moment, his expression changed again and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. P.S. You will never know how big the difference is between a picture and the real person. In front of beauty there is no ugly. Chapter 5:18. The Prison Pagoda. That voice didn't come from outside but from the prison pagoda. The 6th floor. Is the 6th floor awake? Xian's expression darkened. The 5th floor's Dixing was already so heaven-defying, how strong would the 6th floor be? In an instant Xian thought of many bad outcomes. At this moment the voice spoke again. Why are you so nervous? I'm not going to eat you. Xian smiled sheepishly. Senior, you're awake? The voice replied, yes. Xian relaxed. The 6th floor seemed to be quite easy to talk to. The 6th floor spoke again. You can treat the sword as a fish and yourself as the water. Xian fell silent. At this moment he somewhat understood the 6th floor's meaning. One couldn't just use the sword intent to strengthen the sword, but to fuse the sword intent into the sword. Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. His sword intent appeared in the surroundings again, and soon the wooden branch in his hand began to tremble. Using the sword intent to feel the sword, fuse it into the sword. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. About 2 hours later, the wooden branch in Xian's hand suddenly transformed into a sword ray and flew out. The sword ray was silent, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the distance. On the spot, Xian's lips curled up. It's different. This time his flying sword was completely different from before. As if it had a life of its own. Within the prison pagoda, the 6th floor's voice resounded again. The sword intent is a derivative of the sword, and also your sword Dao. You must make good use of it. Xian nodded, then asked, Senior, how do I improve the speed and strength of my flying sword? The 6th floor was silent for a moment, then said, Your current body can only withstand your current strength and speed. Xian asked, In other words, if I want to improve further, I must improve my body? The 6th floor said, That is one way, but there is another way. Xian hurriedly asked, What is it? The 6th floor said, Use your sword intent. Xian said, Please enlighten me, Senior. What do you use as your flying sword now? Xian said, Qi. The 6th replied, You can condense a sword with your sword will. Xian was stunned, and then he opened his palm. In the next moment, a sword appeared in his palm. A sword condensed from sword will. With a slight thought, the sword in Yi Xian's palm flew out. In an instant, the sword appeared 10,000 feet away. Yi Xian was stunned. Quick. This time his flying sword's speed was at least twice as fast as his previous flying sword's speed. At this time the sixth floor spoke again. The sword formed by the sword will is like your arm. Also, the artistic conception is different from qi. It is colorless and shapeless and its weight is lighter. That is why it can travel through space faster. Of course, if you use it properly, it can be even faster. It could be even faster. Yi Xian opened his palm and an intense sword appeared in his hand once again. In the next period of time, Yi Xian started to cultivate the intense sword like a madman. As the sixth floor had said, he could be even faster. His previous black and white swords were formed from sword intent and qi. But now he noticed that without qi the swords were even faster. He'd neglected his sword intent. He'd been neglecting his sword intent all this time. Sword intent. From this moment onward, Yi Xian started to focus on studying his sword intent. Time passed quickly and 10 days had passed in the blink of an eye. At the peak of the mountain, under Yi Xian's control, the two flying swords kept flying across the sky almost instantaneously. This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. The entire sky was covered in a dense expanse of sword light. Yi Xian opened his palm and two swords fell into his palm. They were the swords condensed from his sword intent. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly. His flying swords were even faster than before. Especially with the addition of the spatial Dao law, they were at least 30% faster than before. Don't underestimate this 30%. This 30% was already very terrifying. This 30% meant that when he fought against a creation realm expert in the future, even if he didn't use a sneak attack, he was confident that he could kill the other party in a second. After putting away his swords, Yi Xian scanned his surroundings, feeling a little puzzled. This was because he realized that he didn't know where that old man had gone. And that little martial uncle hadn't appeared either. After a while, Yi Xian shook his head, turned around and walked down the mountain. He had to find Yi Ling. After being here for so long, what he missed the most now was that little girl. He wondered how she was doing. Before long, Yi Xian arrived at Wuyuan. Wuyuan was located on Martial God Mountain, north of Divine Martial City. Martial God Mountain faced the Sword Sect's sky-gazing mountain. At the foot of Martial God Mountain stood a statue of a woman. It was a woman. Yi Xian stood quietly in front of the statue. Martial God? He had never seen a martial god before, but he was very curious. What kind of person could be called a martial god? As if thinking of something, he asked, "Senior, have you seen a martial god before?" He was asking about the sixth story. During this period he realized that the sixth story was quite easy to get along with, at least for now. After a moment of silence, the sixth story said, "I've seen a few, but they are all undeserved. They don't deserve this title at all." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Senior, the fifth story told me that you're not a four-dimensional being but a five-dimensional being?" The sixth story said, "Are you talking about the guy who came here in the form of a soul?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's him." The sixth story said with a smile, "Actually, he's quite powerful. If he hadn't been imprisoned in this tower for so many years, his strength would have been eroded by the Tao principles. Of course, no matter how powerful he is, he's no match for that swordsman." Swordsman. The swordsman in cloud white. He still remembered him. His strength was probably at the same level as the woman in the plain dress. "He's really powerful." The sixth story said, "As for my background, you won't know even if I tell you. Actually, what you should worry about is not the people imprisoned here but the tower itself." "The tower itself?" Yi Xian was confused. "What do you mean, senior?" The sixth story said, "The tower recognized you as its master because of that woman. It didn't really recognize you as its master, right?" Yi Xian was silent. He remembered the second story said that the tower recognized him as its master because it wanted to suck up to the woman in the plain dress. The sixth story said, "It didn't really recognize you as its master. Once it recovers from its injuries, do you think it will still follow you?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Even if it doesn't follow me, it won't kill me." The sixth story said, "What if it wants to kill you?" Yi Xian said, "It won't go that far, right?" The sixth story said, "This thing is from the fifth dimension. Its previous master was extremely powerful and now you... I don't mean to look down on you, but you're really weak now, so weak that I can't find any words to describe it. Yi Xian's face darkened. Can't this guy be more tactful? The sixth story said again. Of course you're not completely useless. At least I still don't understand why the owner of the two swords at the top of the tower would always help you. Sometimes, a backer is also a kind of strength. Yi Xian's face darkened. If this chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Damn it, this guy must be mocking me. Yi Xian decided not to talk to this guy anymore. He walked toward Wuyuan. Soon he arrived at the stone steps leading to Wuyuan. At this time a young man blocked his way. The young man glanced at Yi Xian's right shoulder and frowned. You're a swordsman? Yi Xian nodded. The young man said coldly, Swordsman, what are you doing in Wuyuan? Yi Xian smiled. Brother, I'm here to look for someone. My sister is in Wuyuan. Your sister? The young man frowned. What's her name? Yi Xian said, Yiling and my friends and Lanxiu and Lian Wanli. Hearing this, the young man was stunned. You're saying that Yiling is your sister and Lanxiu and Lian Wanli are your friends? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The young man was furious. You shameless swordsman. In order to chase our Wuyuan's goddess, you came up with such a shameless excuse. Hurry up and get lost. If you don't blame me for being impolite. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. What the hell? Seeing that Yi Xian didn't move, the young man frowned. Why are you still here? Yi Xian was speechless. Brother, the young man said angrily, who's your brother? Let me tell you, if you don't leave now when the seniors see you, you won't be able to leave even if you want to. Yi Xian was silent. Had Wuyuan and Sword Sect become so incompatible? If this happened he would be embarrassed. Because Yiling and the others were all in Wuyuan. What's the matter? At this moment, a voice came from behind the young man. Yi Xian looked up. It was a woman. The woman was in her 20s. She was tall and wore a floral dress. She was very beautiful, especially her long black hair, which was like a waterfall. Seeing this woman, the young man quickly bowed. Senior sister Feng Shui. The woman named Feng Shui walked in front of the young man. What's the matter? The young man quickly said, a swordsman. He said he's looking for senior sister and the others. Swordsman? Feng Shui frowned. She looked at Yi Xian. You're from Sword Sect? Yi Xian nodded. I'm really looking for someone. I don't have any other intentions. Feng Shui walked in front of Yi Xian. You're looking for Lanxiu? Yi Xian said, yes, please inform them. Feng Shui looked straight at Yi Xian. We don't welcome swordsmen here. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Miss, I really don't have any bad intentions. Yiling is my sister. Miss An and Miss Lian are my friends. Please inform them that Yi Xian is looking for them. They will understand. He also wanted to use sound transmission to contact Lian Wanli and the others. However, he found that he couldn't do so at this moment. Apparently, Lian Wanli and the others were in some special environment. Yiling is your sister? At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the side. Yi Xian turned to look. It was a man in luxurious robes. The man looked at Yi Xian. He smiled. You said Yiling is your sister? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Please pass on the message. The man in luxurious robes smiled. What proof do you have that she is your sister? Yi Xian frowned. Your Excellency, I am indeed her brother. The man in luxurious robes waved his hand. Who would believe you without proof? I can even say that she is my woman. I even spent the night with her yesterday. Do you believe me? Hearing this, Yi Xian's face instantly turned cold. At the same time, his eyes suddenly opened. In the next moment, a blood-red sword light slashed out from his eyes. Not far away, the man in luxurious robes' head flew off. Blood spurted out like a fountain. At this moment, everyone in the surroundings was stunned. End of this chapter. Chapter 519. Killed. Just like that. Feng Shui and the others stared at the man's corpse in disbelief. At this moment, Yi Xian was also a little confused. Did I kill him? But soon this thought disappeared. So what if I killed him? Yiling. He would not allow anyone to insult this name. At this time, the voice from the 6th floor suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. I admire your character. A man lives his life to be free. Something goes wrong, he will draw his sword and kill. This is the true nature of a man. Yi Xian ignored the 6th floor. He looked up at the sky with a calm expression. Yiling. No one could understand the position of his sister in his heart. In the Yi family, he and his sister depended on each other. It was also because of his sister that he had the motivation to live on. Otherwise he would have died a long time ago. Insulting him was fine, but insulting Yi Ling was absolutely not allowed. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. In the next moment, the middle-aged man punched at Yi Xian's head. With this punch, the space around Yi Xian directly distorted. It was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian was expressionless. Instead of retreating, he advanced and slashed down with his sword. Boom! As a sword light fell, the middle-aged man in front of Yi Xian was directly blasted dozens of feet away. As soon as the middle-aged man stopped, a flying sword directly pressed against his forehead. This forced him to abruptly stop his attack. He dared not move. If he moved, he would die. At this moment, more and more people gathered around. When they saw that Yi Xian was a swordsman, everyone's eyes became unfriendly. The sword-sec swordsman came to Wuyuan to kill people. This was a naked provocation. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around. As soon as he turned, an afterimage flashed in front of him. Instinctively, Yi Xian raised his sword to block. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian retreated hundreds of feet. At this moment, an old man in sackcloth stood in front of him. The old man looked at Yi Xian coldly. Since when did the sword sect's disciples become so arrogant? How dare you kill people in my Wun? Yi Xian was expressionless. I'm very sorry about what happened just now because that wasn't my purpose for coming here. However, if I was given another chance, I would still kill him. Without the slightest hesitation. The expressions of Wuyuan and the others became unsightly when they heard this. Arrogant. This was 2F** King arrogant. The old man's eyes gradually turned cold. Let the old man see what you're made of. How dare you? As the old man spoke, a flying sword suddenly appeared in front of him at the speed of lightning. The old man's expression changed slightly. He dodged to the side and dodged the flying sword. Then he charged at Yi Xian like a bolt of lightning. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was not far away, suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Rumble. Along with an explosion, Yi Xian retreated repeatedly while the old man was forced to stop on the spot by Yi Xian's attack. At the same time, two flying swords silently appeared in front of and behind the old man. The sudden appearance of these flying swords forced the old man to give up on pursuing Yi Xian. He raised his hands and used his body to resist Yi Xian's flying swords. Bang! Bang! Two rays of light were blasted apart, but the old man was pushed over 100 m back as well. As soon as he stopped, another two flying swords slashed towards him. Bang! Bang! Under the gazes of everyone present, the old man retreated repeatedly in a frenzy. The flying swords were too swift. They were swift to the point the old man couldn't dodge at all. Moreover, the flying swords weren't just swift, they were extremely strong as well. At this moment, there were no less than a few dozen marks on the old man's body. The expressions of everyone here changed when they witnessed this scene. They hadn't expected that the old man would actually be suppressed by Yi Xian. After all, the old man was an academician of Wuyuan. Even though he was only a professor, he was still an academician. How could he be suppressed by a disciple of the sword sect just like that? It didn't take long for the old man to retreat over 1 kilometer away. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's flying sword stopped moving. Because a middle-aged man who held a ruler was standing not too far away from him. It's Master Lin. Someone exclaimed with shock. Master Lin. He was a martial master who specialized in teaching martial arts in Wuyuan, and his strength was absolutely not something an ordinary academician could compare to. Master Lin gazed at Yi Xian. He didn't speak and was about to attack. It was pointless to say anything at this moment. Right when Master Lin was about to attack, Yi Xian suddenly chuckled. So it turns out that Wuyuan doesn't just like to bully the weak, they like to take turns to fight. I've learned something new today. Master Lin stopped when he heard this. Master Lin looked at Yi Xian with an icy cold expression. You came to my Wuyuan to kill people and cause trouble. What? Do you hope that my Wuyuan will fight you fairly? Yi Xian opened his palm, and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his hand. He walked towards Master Lin with the sword in his hand. Then let's fight. As soon as he finished speaking, he tapped the ground lightly with the tip of his foot. Yi Xian transformed into a ray of light that shot out explosively, and the space in his path was directly torn apart. In the distance, Master Lin's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. In the next moment he raised his ruler and blocked. Bang! The space in front of Master Lin suddenly collapsed, and at this moment 2 flying swords suddenly appeared above and behind Master Lin. Master Lin's expression instantly changed, and his figure flashed to the left by over 100 m. As soon as he stopped, a ray of light suddenly slashed down from above his head. Master Lin's pupils constricted slightly, and he raised his ruler to block it. Bang! As soon as Yi Xian's attack descended, Master Lin was blasted back repeatedly. At the same time 2 rays of light flashed. Bang! Bang! The 2 rays of light collapsed into pieces while Master Lin had moved over 1 kilometer back. Yi Xian was just about to continue attacking when Master Lin suddenly raised his head to look at Yi Xian. In the next moment, Master Lin's figure suddenly vanished on the spot. Yi Xian, who was about to attack, suddenly frowned. Because countless ruler images had suddenly appeared around him, and they formed a dense mass that enveloped him. But it wasn't long before they were slashed into pieces by the 2 rays of light. But it only took a moment for a ruler to arrive in front of him. Yi Xian stabbed forward with his sword. Bang! Yi Xian instantly moved over 100 m back, and the ground beneath his feet instantly cracked apart as soon as he descended to the ground. Master Lin was just about to continue attacking, but the 2 rays of light forcefully stopped him on the spot. Master Lin didn't continue attacking and he just glanced at the surroundings. The battle had caused the surroundings to be in a mess. At this moment, it was pointless for him to continue attacking. Firstly, he wasn't confident in his ability to kill Yi Xian. Secondly, he'd suffered injuries from his sword while Yi Xian was completely unharmed. So he was in a disadvantaged position right now. Thirdly, if he were to continue attacking and lose, then he wouldn't just lose face for himself, he would lose face for Wuyuan as well. A martial master of Wuyuan had actually lost to a disciple of the sword sect. If news of this were to spread, then Wuyuan's reputation would be ruined. He couldn't lose. When Yi Xian saw that Master Lin wasn't attacking, he didn't attack as well. Because Master Lin wasn't weak, and he had to reveal his trump cards if he wanted to kill Master Lin. Suddenly, a voice resounded from not too far behind Yi Xian. "Brother Yi?" It was a familiar voice. Yi Xian turned around and he was instantly stunned when he saw the person who spoke. The person who came was the war army. The war army ran to Yi Xian and laughed. "You're here too." Yi Xian smiled slightly. "I just arrived." The war army laughed. "It's good that you're here. Are you also here to join Wuyuan?" Yi Xian shook his head. The war army still wanted to say something. Suddenly he seemed to think of something and said in surprise, "I heard them say that a swordsman came here to kill people. Is it you?" Yi Xian smiled. "It's me." The war army's expression froze. After a while he shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Brother Yi, you're here to fight." Yi Xian smiled slightly. "I was originally looking for my sister Yi Ling. Something happened so we started fighting." The war army nodded slightly and wanted to say something, but Yi Xian said, "You step aside first. I'll solve this myself." Now that the war army was from Wuyuan, if he was too close to the war army, it would not be a good thing for the war army. The war army was a little unhappy. "Brother Yi, what are you saying? In the heart of the war army the world is big, but the brothers are the most important." Yi Xian smiled and said, "I know. Let me handle this myself." The war army hesitated, then turned to look at Master Lin not far away. He bowed slightly. "Master Lin, there must be some misunderstanding." Master Lin frowned slightly. "Misunderstanding? He came to my Wuyuan to kill our Wuyuan students, and you're telling me there's a misunderstanding?" The war army still wanted to say something, but Master Lin said coldly, "Step back." The war army said in a deep voice, "Master Lin, my brother will never kill people for no reason. There must be some misunderstanding." Master Lin's eyes narrowed slightly. "I told you to step back." The war army still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly said, "Brother Zhang, let me handle this myself." As he said, he walked to the front of the war army and patted the war army's shoulder gently. "Don't implicate you because of my matter. Otherwise I won't feel at ease." The war army hesitated and then nodded. "Brother Yi, we can talk about it. Let's talk about it." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Okay, let's talk." As he said, he turned to look at Master Lin not far away. Master Lin sneered. "Talk? Talk about what? If you want to talk about it, sure." You killed my Wuyuan disciple. You must pay for his life first. Hearing this, the war army's face suddenly darkened. He knew that this matter would definitely not be settled peacefully, because he was very clear about Yi Xian's temper. This was definitely a guy who could be persuaded but not cowed. Hearing Master Lin's words, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Master Lin, if I humiliate your loved ones, what will you do? Master Lin's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? Yi Xian smiled and said, Today I came here to find my sister, but the Wuyuan students won't let me in because I am a disciple of the sword sect. Not only that, your Wuyuan students also humiliated my sister. Speaking of this, his expression gradually became ferocious. Who gave him the guts to humiliate my sister? Is it your Wuyuan? Master Lin said ferociously. So what if it is? Yi Xian smiled and said, Then I killed him. What can you do? What can your Wuyuan do? P.S. 10 minutes late. Tell me, what position do you want? Chapter 520. Lin Shi's expression instantly became extremely ferocious when he heard Yi Xian. Lin Shi was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Master Lin held the long ruler horizontally in front of him. Bang! The space in front of Lin Shi was instantly shattered, and then a sword slashed down on the ruler. Bang! Lin Shi's ruler shook violently while countless cracks appeared on it. At the same time, countless rays of light enveloped Lin Shi. A moment of silence ensued. Rumble. A figure retreated explosively. It was Lin Shi. Lin Shi had just stopped when a ray of light flashed, and then Lin Shi's expression changed drastically. His figure flashed, but it was still too late. One of Lin Shi's arms flew into the air. Yi Xian intended to attack again, but a furious shout suddenly resounded from the mountain peak. How dare you! As soon as the voice resounded, a powerful aura swept down from the sky. Yi Xian was forced 300 m back by this aura. Moreover, the space around him cracked open as soon as he stopped moving, but it recovered in an instant. Meanwhile, a white-haired old man appeared in front of Yi Xian. Everyone here bowed in unison when they saw the white-haired old man. Vice Dean. The Vice Dean. He was the Vice Dean of Wuyuan, Qin Shan. Qin Shan glanced at Yi Xian with an expressionless face. Do you think this is the sword sect? Yi Xian was about to speak when Qin Shan suddenly pressed his right hand forward. The space around Yi Xian instantly collapsed, but it instantly recovered in the next moment. However, a wisp of blood had appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. Qin Shan was about to attack again when a voice suddenly resounded from behind him. Brother Qin, it's not good to bully the weak. Qin Shan's eyes narrowed slightly and then he turned around. An old man had suddenly appeared not too far away from him. This person was the old man who taught Yi Xian. Qin Shan looked at the old man coldly. Yu Wuchen, is your sword sect declaring war on my Wuyuan? Yu Wuchen smiled and said, It's just a small matter. Do you have to be so serious? Qin Shan said coldly, Small matter? Your sword sect's disciples came to Wuyuan to kill people and you say this is a small matter? Yu Wuchen said calmly, Old Qin, why don't you ask him why he killed them? Qin Shan stared straight at Yu Wuchen. No matter what the reason is, he killed someone from my Wuyuan. My Wuyuan will not let him go. Today he must die here. No one can take him away. Yu Wuchen smiled and said, All right. I won't force you if you don't want to talk about it. However, don't you think it's too shameful for a senior like you to bully a junior? Qin Shan sneered. Why? Are you trying to provoke me? Yu Wuchen shook his head. In my opinion, he killed your Wuyuan's disciple. Even if your Wuyuan wants to take revenge, you shouldn't be the one to do it. What do you think? Qin Shan kept quiet. Yu Wuchen said again, Old Qin, even if you killed him, can your Wuyuan regain its face? No, if this spreads out, others will only think that your Wuyuan is useless, that the juniors are useless and only the seniors can do it. Qin Shan sneered. Do you think my Wuyuan doesn't have anyone capable? Then he turned around and looked at an old man not far away. Let her do it. The old man nodded slightly and left. Qin Shan looked at Yu Wuchen coldly. Old lunatic, I know you want to save him, but I'm telling you today my Wuyuan will take his life. Yu Wuchen ignored Qin Shan and walked to Yi Xian. You killed someone? Yi Xian nodded his head. Yu Wuchen asked, Why did you kill him? Yi Xian said honestly, That person insulted my sister. Yu Wuchen frowned. Verbal insult? Yi Xian nodded his head. Yu Wuchen said in a deep voice, "You're going to kill someone just because of a verbal insult?" Yi Xian looked at Yu Wuchen. "I'll kill whoever insulted my sister." Yu Wuchen's expression changed when he heard that. Murderous intent. He could sense a strong murderous intent from Yi Xian's tone. At that moment Yu Wuchen seemed to have understood something. Reverse scale. No matter how weak a person was, they all had their reverse scale, and Yi Xian's reverse scale should be his younger sister. Yu Wuchen sighed softly. Although he had not known Yi Xian for long, he had some understanding of Yi Xian's character. He was definitely not a kind person. Not far away, Xianxia suddenly laughed coldly. "Insulted your sister? He only insulted your sister and you want to kill him?" Yi Xian suddenly pointed his sword at Xianxia. "Old man, if you have a problem, come at me. Don't touch my sister. Otherwise I'll go crazy and kill all the students of Wuyan." Hearing Yi Xian's words, Xianxia was furious. "Insolent kid, you want to kill the students of Wuyuan?" At that moment, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Xianxia. Xianxia's expression softened slightly when he saw the woman. "Shaoan, don't hold back. Kill him." Shaoan turned to look at Yi Xian and she was instantly stunned when she saw Yi Xian. Shaoan was in Lanxiu. Yi Xian grinned when he saw in Lanxiu. "I never expected that we would meet in this way." And Lanxiu turned to look at Xianxia. "Why do you want to kill him?" Xianxia frowned slightly when he heard in Lanxiu. "I asked you to kill him." And Lanxiu looked Xianxia in the eyes. "Reason." Xianxia was about to speak when Lanxiu suddenly shook her head. "No reason." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and walked towards Yi Xian. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Is this a public betrayal? Yu Wuchen was stunned as well. What's going on? Behind Lanxiu, Xianxia suddenly roared, "Stop!" And Lanxiu stopped and turned around to look at Xianxia. Xianxia's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. "Do you know what you're doing?" And Lanxiu said, "He's my friend." Friend. Everyone looked at Yi Xian in unison. A friend of the sword sect? Since an unknown period of time, Wuyuan and the sword sect could be said to be enemies, and it could even be said to be like fire and water. Yet now, a disciple of Wuyuan had actually said that a disciple of the sword sect was her friend. Xianxia's expression became extremely unsightly when he heard in Lanxiu, "Friend? You must remember that you're a student of Wuyuan now." And Lanxiu's face was expressionless. "Then from now onward, I'm not a student of Wuyuan anymore." An uproar arose in the surroundings when they heard Lanxiu. Xianxia was stunned as well. He hadn't expected that Lanxiu would say such a thing. Not a student of Wuyuan anymore? At this moment not only was Xianxia not angry, but he was serious. Because he was very clear about Lanxiu's excellence. It could be said that she was one of the most outstanding students that Wuyuan had accepted in recent years, especially when Lanxiu had the bloodline of the martial god. This had alarmed all the higher-ups in Wuyuan. He knew very well what this martial god bloodline meant. Once such a student left Wuyuan, it would be a huge loss to Wuyuan. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. "Shaoan, don't be rash." As the voice faded, a middle-aged man descended from the stone steps. He walked down. When they saw this person, all the disciples of the Wuyuan Institute hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Dean." "President." The person in front of him was the Dean of Wuyuan, Xianxia. He was also a rare super expert in the all-heaven starfield. Yu Wuchen frowned when he saw Xianxia. If Xianxia attacked, then he wasn't confident in his ability to take Yi Xian with him. Xianxia walked over to Lanxiu and Yi Xian, glanced at Yi Xian and then looked at Lanxiu. He smiled and said, "He's a friend of yours from the never-ending starfield?" And Lanxiu nodded. Xianxia nodded slightly and then he gazed at Feng Shui. "What happened just now?" Feng Shui was slightly hesitant. Heliantendo said, "Tell me the truth." Feng Shui nodded slightly and then she glanced at Yi Xian and said, "He came to look for his younger sister just now." It didn't take long for Feng Shui to tell them everything that had happened just now. She didn't leave anything out or exaggerate anything. After listening to Feng Shui's words, the entire place suddenly quietened down. In all fairness, it wasn't wrong for Yi Xian to come look for his younger sister. Xianxia glanced coldly at the young man by Feng Shui's side. It was the young man who'd stopped Yi Xian earlier. The young man's face instantly turned pale when he saw Qin Shan look over. Even though the Wuyuan Academy and the sword sect were enemies, he would definitely suffer now that the matter had blown up. Meanwhile, He Liantian gazed at Yi Xian and smiled. You said that Yi Ling is your younger sister? Yi Xian nodded. He Liantian's smile became slightly unnatural when he heard this, and then he asked, Is Lian Wanli your friend as well? Yi Xian nodded. That's true. He Liantian and Qin Shan's expressions became slightly unsightly when they heard Yi Xian. It was especially so for Qin Shan. Only now did he realize that the monstrous geniuses that the Wuyuan Academy had recruited recently were related to Yi Xian. Meanwhile, Yu Wuchen suddenly smiled and said, In that case it's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. He Liantian nodded slightly. It's a misunderstanding. Qin Shan spoke in a low voice, Dean. He Liantian shook his head slightly. It's a misunderstanding, a huge misunderstanding. He looked at Yi Xian as he spoke. What do you think? Yi Xian said, I don't care if it's a misunderstanding or not. I only care about my younger sister. It's fine if the Wuyan doesn't allow me to see my younger sister. I'll just leave with my younger sister. Qin Shan's expression changed when he heard this. Just as he was about to speak, He Liantian smiled and said, Why wouldn't they allow you to see her? Since you're her brother, it's only right for siblings to meet each other. He paused for a moment before he continued, How about this? Why don't you come to the Wuyuan Academy? Not only can you reunite with your friend, but you can also be with your younger sister. It's killing two birds with one stone. Upon hearing He Liantian's words, Yu Wuchen's expression changed. He was about to speak when Yi Xian, who was in front of He Liantian, suddenly said, Join the martial arts institution? He Liantian nodded. Yes. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I'm a disciple of the sword sect. As long as the sword sect doesn't betray me, I'll be a disciple of the sword sect forever. Therefore I appreciate Senior's kindness. He was not stupid. If he said that he wanted to join the Wuyuan Academy now, it would be equivalent to offending the entire sword sect. Moreover, if he betrayed the Wuyuan Academy and joined the Wuyuan Academy, the people of the Wuyuan Academy would look down on him. At that time he would really be in a disadvantageous position. If he expressed his loyalty now, the sword sect would definitely protect him to the death. Once he joined the Wuyuan Academy, if the Wuyuan Academy wanted to kill him, he would really have no backing. Hearing Yi Xian Academy's words, He Liantian fell silent. There was a faint smile on his face, but there was a cold glint in the depths of his eyes. Chapter 521. Yu Wuchen instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Yi Xian. If Yi Xian sided with Wuyuan right now, then there was really nothing he could do about it. Of course, if Yi Xian really did that, then it wouldn't be a bad thing for the sword sect. There was no loss if Yi Xian betrayed them now, but if Yi Xian betrayed them in the future, then the sword sect would definitely suffer unbearable losses. He Liantian grinned and said to Yi Xian, I won't force it. As he spoke, he gazed at Xianxia. Little An, go back and cultivate. Xianxia fell silent for a short moment before she nodded. All right. Both He Liantian and Qin Shan heaved a sigh of relief when they heard this. Xianxia's answer represented that she wouldn't leave Wuyuan. Yu Wuchen heaved a sigh of relief as well. He naturally hoped that Xianxia would leave with Yi Xian, but if she did that now, then Wuyuan would definitely stop at nothing to kill both Xianxia and Yi Xian. After all, Wuyuan wouldn't give two peerless geniuses to the sword sect for nothing. Moreover, Wuyuan had a perfectly justifiable reason to kill both Xianxia and Yi Xian. However, Xianxia was willing to stay, so the situation was different. Wuyuan would compromise. It was worth it to compromise for the sake of an extraordinary genius. Xianxia gazed at Yi Xian. Let's meet again next time. Ling is cultivating and she'll come out in a few days. You can come look for her at that time. Yi Xian thought for a moment before he nodded. All right. Xianxia nodded lightly and then she turned around and left. Yu Wuchen smiled. Sect Master Helion, since the misunderstanding has been resolved, then we'll be taking our leave as well. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Yi Xian and vanished on the spot. He Liantian suddenly said, Disperse. All the students of Wuyuan left when they heard this, and only He Liantian and Qin Shan remained. Qin Shan said solemnly, Sect Master, then Shaoan, He Liantian asked softly, are you trying to say that she might betray you in the future? Qin Shan was silent. Xianxia asked. How long has it been since she came to Wun? Not even half a month had passed. You want her to have a sense of belonging to Wuyuan in such a short time? What are you thinking? Besides, Yi Xian is her friend from the never-ending starfield. If she killed him for Wuyuan's sake, we would have to worry instead. Hearing this, Xianxia nodded slightly. Indeed. When Wuyuan recruited people, they not only valued talent but also their character. Nurturing a tiger only to invite calamity was something that no one wanted to happen to themselves. Xianxia hesitated for a moment before saying, Shaoan. Xianxia smiled and said, the ones who should be worried are the sword sect. Xianxia was puzzled. Why? Xianxia said, Yi Xian's sister and friend are in Wun. Don't you think the sword sect should be worried? Then he looked in the direction of the sword sect in the distance. Get someone to investigate this person. After he finished speaking, he had already disappeared. A moment later, Xianxia turned around and left. Yu Wuchen brought Yi Xian back to the sword sect. On the mountain peak, Yu Wuchen looked at Yi Xian. Do you know that if it weren't for that girl's intelligence, you wouldn't have been able to come back this time? Yi Xian was silent. Yu Wuchen sighed softly. This Shenwu city is not a simple place. You have to think about the consequences before you do anything next time, understand? Yi Xian nodded. Understood. Yu Wuchen shook his head. Understand my A**. Then he looked at Yi Xian. Cultivate well during this time. Don't go out. Although Xianxia and Xianxia won't do anything to you, the younger generation of Wuyuan won't let this go. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Why do Wuyuan and Sword Sect hate each other so much? Yu Wuchen pointed to the distance. Shenwu City only has this much territory. In this city there are only two forces, our Sword Sect and Wuyuan. Tell me, do you think they like it? Yi Xian said, I saw two statues outside the city. Yu Wuchen said softly, in the beginning Wuyuan and our Sword Sect lived in harmony. But you know, time can change many things. Yi Xian shook his head. He didn't expect things to turn out like this after he came to Shenwu City. In the future, when the Sword Sect and Wuyuan fight, it's not impossible. Thinking of this, he felt a headache. At this time, Yu Wuchen said, if there's nothing important, don't go out of Shenwu City. Then he turned and left. On the spot, Yi Xian frowned. After a while, he knew that the Sword Sect must have investigated his background. And this Yu Wuchen didn't allow him to leave Shenwu City. Obviously, those who wanted his treasure were outside the city. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian turned and left. The monarch hound suddenly asked, Kid, where are you going? To kill people. From Qing City until now, he himself was feeling slightly aggrieved because there were too many people who wanted this treasure of his. But now he didn't want to passively wait for them to attack. He wanted to take the initiative. Especially now, with Shenwu City as his support, he could run if he couldn't win. Soon Yi Xian left Shenwu City. Of course, he didn't leave the city in broad daylight. With the chaos chi concealment, it was difficult for ordinary people to notice him. Somewhere, an old man looked at Shenwu City from afar with a gloomy face. Behind the old man there was a red shadow. The old man said in a deep voice, This sword sect is not ordinary. With Yi Xian's talent, if he joins the sword sect, soon we old guys won't be his match. The red shadow nodded. With his current strength he can easily kill Manifestation Realm experts. If this continues, I'm afraid even Dao Realm experts won't be able to do anything to him. The old man looked at the red shadow. What's the sword sect's attitude? The red shadow said in a deep voice. Right now the sword sect's attitude is unclear. The old man asked again, What about the Star Lord? The red shadow said in a deep voice. There's no movement either. But I don't think he will let this go. In the battle at Never-Ending Starfield he suffered heavy losses. Not only him but all the starfields that participated in the battle also suffered heavy losses. The old man said in a deep voice, Then who is the person behind Yi Xian? The red shadow said, The person behind Yi Xian is also a mystery. The old man looked at Shenwu City. Do you know why Shenwu City is a special place? The red shadow said, Wun and the sword sect are powerful. The old man said softly, That's part of the reason. But there's another reason. There's a dragon vein in Shenwu City, a divine grey dragon vein. Dragon vein. The red shadow's expression changed slightly. In this world, spirit chi was the foundation of all living things. And some places, because of the nourishment of heaven and earth, would have spirit veins. Places with spirit veins would usually be occupied by powerful forces. Especially places with good spirit veins, they would be used as grotto heavens. And above spirit veins were dragon veins. The spirit chi gathered in dragon veins was extremely terrifying, especially when the dragon vein in Xianwu City was a divine grade dragon vein, the highest level of dragon vein. The old man said, although there's a dragon vein in Xianwu City, no one has ever dared to covet it. Do you know why? The Red Shadow said, the Wuyuan and the sword sect of Xianwu City are very powerful. The old man nodded. Very powerful, so powerful that it's unfathomable. Even the Star Lord wouldn't dare to covet the dragon vein. But it's different now. The Red Shadow asked, Zhou Xian? The old man nodded slightly. The dragon's vein is not a must, but the treasure on Zhou Xian is something that many people can't get their hands on. For example, Master. He was determined to get his hands on this treasure. Apart from Master, some old monsters have come out of seclusion. The Red Shadow said, but Xianwu City, the old man said with a smile. In the past no one wanted to provoke Xianwu City, but now they don't care about that. Especially with the divine grade dragon vein in Xianwu City, it's very tempting. The Red Shadow asked, what's Master's plan? The old man chuckled. Wait, someone will be more anxious than us. The Red Shadow said, the Star Lord. The old man nodded. In half a month at most the Star Lord will make a move. The Red Shadow said, this Xianwu City is not simple. It's indeed not simple. The old man looked at the two statues in front of the Xianwu City. Rumor has it that the Wuyuan Ancestral Master and the Sword Sect Ancestral Master are in Xianwu City. This should be their biggest support. Saying this, he shook his head and smiled. If the Sword Sect doesn't give up on Zhou Xian, not to mention an Ancestral Master, even if their Ancestral Master is reborn, it's useless. The Red Shadow was about to speak, but at this moment his face changed dramatically. In a flash his figure flashed and he retreated. But the old man in front of him reacted faster than him. The moment the Red Shadow retreated, he slammed his palm forward. Rumble. As the palm fell, the space in front of him collapsed. However, he was still a bit slow and a sword ray penetrated his forehead first. The old man's body stiffened. He wanted to abandon his body, but he found that his soul couldn't escape from his body at all. Behind the old man was Zhou Xian with the soul-suppressing sword. At this moment Zhou Xian's aura was extremely powerful because there was a dragon soul in his body. Facing this old man, Zhou Xian directly used the dragon soul because if he didn't use the dragon soul he wasn't confident that he could kill the old man in one strike. After seeing Zhou Xian kill the old man in an instant, the Red Shadow not far away didn't hesitate. He turned around and ran at an extremely fast speed, disappearing into the end of the starry sky in the blink of an eye. Zhou Xian still didn't chase after him. Instead he withdrew the dragon soul and walked in front of the old man. The old man wasn't completely dead yet. He stared at Zhou Xian and said, "You've actually become so strong." Zhou Xian said with a smile, "Surprised? Surprised?" The old man sneered, "Zhou Xian, do you know what your biggest weakness is?" Zhou Xian's smile gradually turned cold. "What do you mean?" The old man's smile widened. "Our information shows that your biggest weakness is your sister. If I'm not wrong, they should have already started that plan." At this moment Zhou Xian suddenly held the long sword in his hand and pointed it at the old man's forehead. "Don't even think about touching my sister, otherwise I'll definitely let you know what it means to beg for death." As his voice fell, he stabbed the sword bit by bit. Blood splattered. P.S. Asking for votes. Some readers said I'm getting more and more shameless. Chapter 522. Just like that, Zhou Xian's sword pierced bit by bit into the old man's forehead. His soul-suppressing sword was madly devouring the old man's soul. The old man laughed madly. "Zhou Xian, the more you care about your sister, the more miserable her fate will be." Zhou Xian suddenly slashed with his sword. The old man's head flew into the air. Zhou Xian's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. Meanwhile, the Emperor Hound said solemnly, "They want to attack the people around you." Zhou Xian silently held the soul-suppressing sword. The Emperor Hound said, "Don't be anxious. Although their target is your sister, she is in Wuyuan now. They have no chance to attack." Zhou Xian shook his head. They will definitely attack. He knew that those people would definitely stop at nothing to obtain the prison pagoda. It would be difficult for them to attack him, so they would definitely attack his friends, especially his sister. Yi Xian said solemnly, "Brother Emperor Hound, I need your help." The Emperor Hound said, "Should I go protect her in secret?" Yi Xian nodded, "I will feel more at ease with you there." The Emperor Hound said, "All right. However, you have to be careful. They will definitely keep a close eye on you." Yi Xian said, "Don't worry. If I can't beat them, I will run." The Emperor Hound smiled, "I'm just afraid that you will be brainless and fight them head-on. Be careful." With that, the Emperor Hound left the prison pagoda and vanished. In the field, Yi Xian took a deep breath. Kill. He wanted to kill now. Yi Xian quickly vanished. On the other side, the red figure that fled stopped. He was far away from Divine Martial City. Terrifying. The previous scene was truly a frightening one for him. The old man was stronger than him, but he was instantly killed by Yi Xian. Although Yi Xian had launched a sneak attack, it was still extremely terrifying. This Yi Xian's strength was a little too strong. And Yi Xian would only become stronger if he continued to be like this. If this kind of person wasn't killed, there would be endless troubles in the future. The red shadow remained silent for a moment before he turned around and left. He no longer dared to keep an eye on Yi Xian. Yi Xian returned to the Divine Martial City. He went to Wuyuan again, but this time he didn't go in. Not long after, the war army walked out of Wuyuan. This time, in addition to the war army, there was another group of people. A familiar person. Mo Yunqi, Jiang Jiao and the others. Seeing these people, Yi Xian was stunned. At this time, Mo Yun ran up to Yi Xian and gave Yi Xian a big hug. "Bandit Yi, are you surprised to see me?" Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, Jiang Jiao and Bai Zhe walked up to Yi Xian. Jiang Jiao sized up Yi Xian. "Where's my saber?" "Saber." Yi Xian was stunned. Then he hurriedly took out a saber. A golden saber. This was a gift from Jiang Jiao. Naturally, he had been keeping it well. Seeing this golden saber, Jiang Jiao's expression softened. She glanced at Yi Xian. "Aren't you happy to see me?" Yi Xian hugged Jiang Jiao and laughed. "I'm happy. Very happy." Jiang Jiao was speechless. Not far away, Mo Yunqi curled his lips. Prioritizing a lover over a friend. Beside Mo Yunqi, Bai Zhe said calmly, "You should know your place." Mo Yunqi said angrily, "What do you mean?" Bai Zhe was expressionless. "I said you're stupid." Mo Yunqi was speechless. Ji Anji glanced at Yi Xian and Jiang Jiao. He didn't say anything. After a while, Yi Xian and the others found a restaurant in the city. They sat around the table. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Mo Yunqi looked at the dishes on the table and shook his head. This is far from Bandit Ye's cooking. Hearing Mo Yunqi's words, Bai Zhe and Jiang Jiao both looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian. At this moment, they recalled their days at Azure Region's Azure Billow Academy. Yi Xian asked softly, "How is Azure Billow Academy now?" Mo Yunqi said, "It's developing very well. It's already the top academy in Azure Firmament World. Moreover, we have a good relationship with Azure Sword Sect. Now, everyone in Azure Firmament World is proud to join our Azure Billow Academy." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "That's good." Mo Yunqi suddenly smiled. "Bandit, you're too fast. We almost couldn't catch up to you. If it wasn't for those violet sources that you sent to me, we probably wouldn't be able to see each other for the rest of our lives." Yi Xian said, "Your natural endowments aren't bad. So long as you have sufficient resources, you won't be inferior to anyone." Mo Yunqi chuckled. "I think so too." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "This fellow is still so sly." Meanwhile, Jiang Jiao suddenly said, "Do you have any plans?" "Plans?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "I don't have any plans. What I have to do now is become stronger." "Become stronger." Mo Yunqi nodded slightly. "We understand." After coming from Azure City, they'd realized that without strength, everything was fleeting. In this world, the strong were respected and the strong survived. It was just that cruel. Yi Xian said, "Have all of you joined Wuyuan?" Mo Yunqi nodded. "Wuyuan is more suitable for us. You know that we don't know anything about swords." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Don't leave Shenwu City during this period of time. Some fellows are spying on me in the dark. I'm afraid they'll have designs on you." Mo Yunqi and the others glanced at each other. In the end, Jiang Jiu said in a low voice, "Don't worry. We won't leave Wuyun easily." Yi Xian nodded and then he looked at the war army. "Brother Zhan, do me a favor. Help me find out if there are any experts in this starfield that can be invited with money." The war army was stunned and then he said, "You're looking for someone?" Yi Xian nodded. This time he wasn't going to do it alone. What he lacked the least now was violet sources. Find helpers. The more helpers the better. The war army thought about it and then he said, "Leave this to me. As long as there's money, I believe that many experts will be willing to help." Yi Xian nodded. "If possible, help me look at the surrounding starfields and see if there are any rogue cultivator experts in the surrounding starfields." The war army got up. "I'll contact them now." Speaking of this, he hesitated and then he asked, "Then what level of expert should I invite?" Yi Xian said, "At least creation realm." The war army said in a low voice, "An expert of this level may need a lot of violet sources." Yi Xian smiled. "This doesn't matter. I'm not short of money." Along the way he killed countless experts. The souls of those experts were basically devoured by Little Soul, but he kept all their things. Moreover, he had already contacted the divine race and asked them to send him some immortal artifacts. The divine race had hundreds of immortal artifacts. These immortal artifacts were still very valuable in the eyes of Creation Realm experts. After all, not everyone had Creation Realm treasures. 2 hours later, Jiang Jiu and the others returned to Wuyuan. For them now, Wuyuan was the safest place. Wuyuan in a small courtyard. Jiang Jiu and the others sat around the table. Mo Yunqi said in a low voice, "Among the 4 of us, the 9th princess is the strongest. She is already Origin Realm, the closest to Saint Realm, but..." Speaking of this, he shook his head and smiled. "Bandit Ye's enemy is too strong. I'm afraid that the few of us will still be a burden to him." Bai Zhe nodded. "Burden?" Jiang Jiu was silent and his face was a little gloomy. At this moment, Ji Anji suddenly said softly, "This chapter is not over, please turn the page." "You shouldn't think that way." Everyone looked at Ji Anji. Ji Anji said, "As a friend, help if you can. If you can't, just try your best. What we can do now is to cultivate well. Don't think too much about other things." Jiangju got up. "Let's cultivate." After that, he and Ji Anji turned and left. Mo Yunqi looked at Bai Zhe. "Actually, I really want to beat him up." Bai Zhe nodded slightly. "I want to. The problem is I can't beat him. So I can only beat you." Mo Yunqi was instantly furious. After Yi Xian returned to the sword sect, he went straight to Yu Wuchen. "You want swords?" Yu Wuchen looked at Yi Xian in front of him curiously. Yi Xian nodded. "I want a lot of swords." Yu Wuchen was silent. Yi Xian asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Wuchen said in a low voice, "If you only want one, I can get you an immortal artifact sword. But if you want a lot..." Yi Xian thought for a while and said, "I can buy it." Yu Wuchen shook his head. "These swords the sword sect will not sell. Because if these swords are in the hands of the sword sect's disciples, their power is boundless. Therefore the sect values these swords very much." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." At this moment Yu Wuchen waved his right hand. A sword suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The sword was 5 feet long. It was a third longer than a normal sword. Moreover, the sword was extremely thin like a cicada's wing. Apart from that, this sword had no hilt. Yi Xian looked at Yu Wuchen. "Senior," Yu Wuchen said, "this is my sword. It's called Desolate Spirit. It's also a flying sword. It's made of a special material. It's as light as a feather. It's very suitable for you." Yi Xian shook his head. "Senior, this is your sword." Yu Wuchen shook his head and smiled. "I'm not skilled in flying swords. I can't bring out its true might in my hands. Don't be wishy-washy and keep it." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he kept the Desolate Spirit. Just as Yu Wuchen had said, he felt as if he was holding air when he held this sword. It's too light. Even though this sword wasn't at the Fortune Realm, it was absolutely a top-rate existence amongst immortal artifacts. Yu Wuchen glanced at Yi Xian. "Remember, don't leave the city." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian kept the Desolate Spirit sword, and then he sat down cross-legged on the ground. For some unknown reason, he felt slightly agitated as if something bad was about to happen. Meanwhile, the voice from the sixth floor suddenly resounded in Yi Xian's mind. If you give up on your younger sister, then your sword will become unimaginably strong. The stronger your obsession with your younger sister, the stronger your sword will be. Yi Xian shook his head. My younger sister is everything to me. For her, I can give up everything including the sword. Of course, my younger sister doesn't conflict with the sword. The voice from the sixth floor said, but if you give up on her and focus on the sword, then you will become even stronger. Yi Xian said softly, by then I will lose the meaning of cultivating the sword. This is obsession. Oh, obsession it is then. Hey, that's the devil. So be it. You're willing to become a devil? What's the difference between a devil and a god? In the eyes of the world, devils are bad and gods are good. In my opinion, the so-called devils aren't necessarily bad, and the so-called gods aren't necessarily good. You're right. Are you interested in becoming a devil? Are devils strong? They're all right. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, then asked, Senior, are you a devil? The voice from the sixth floor said, they all call me the great devil. Actually, I think I'm a good person. Yi Xian asked, then why were you locked up? The voice from the sixth floor said, this stupid tower of yours only looks at the strong and the weak, not the good and the bad. Yi Xian, end of this chapter. Chapter 523. Broken Tower. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Senior, how did you encounter this tower? The sixth replied, it can sense the aura of powerhouses. As long as it has the ability or potential to enter the fifth dimension, it will do it. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, Senior, why doesn't it let people enter the fifth dimension? The sixth replied, who knows? He paused for a moment before continuing, however, there is one thing you have to be careful about. This tower is indeed a pass to enter the fifth dimension. Without this pass, no matter how strong you are, you won't be able to enter the fifth dimension. Yi Xian was confused. Why? The sixth replied, because only this broken tower knows how to enter the fifth dimension. Without it, no matter how strong you are, you won't be able to enter the fifth dimension because there is no way to enter the fifth dimension. Yi Xian asked again, then how do you know about the fifth dimension? Is it because of this tower? The sixth replied, yes. Yi Xian was confused. Why? The sixth replied, if you see it at its peak you will understand. Of course, I don't know if anyone has found the way to the fifth dimension. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, that means I have a pass to the fifth dimension? The man on the sixth floor laughed. You have to wake up. Firstly, this stupid pagoda chose to recognize you as its master. Secondly, there will be a lot of people who want this stupid pagoda. Yi Xian asked, Senior, you don't want it? The sixth replied, I don't really want to go to the fifth dimension. This broken tower is not that attractive to me. Yi Xian smiled. He didn't say anything. He naturally wouldn't believe the sixth's words. In any case, it was always good to be cautious. Moreover, he had a feeling the sixth was not simple. He had a good temper. This was not normal. A person who had been locked up for so many years couldn't be so calm. In all fairness, if he was the one who had been locked up for so many years, he would definitely go crazy. Moreover, this guy seemed to be some kind of demon. In any case, from his point of view, regardless of whether the other party was acting or not, he had to maintain his vigilance. A moment later, Yi Xian left the sword sect. Yi Xian arrived at a chamber of commerce in the divine martial city. Tongbao Chamber of Commerce. This merchant guild was the only one in the godly martial city. This merchant guild was extremely mysterious and no one knew where they came from. However, to be able to open a merchant guild in the godly martial city was enough to prove that they were not simple. As soon as he entered the Chamber of Commerce, a woman came to greet him. The woman was tall and slender with delicate features and a smile on her face. The woman walked in front of Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Honored guest, what do you need? Yi Xian said, selling things. As he spoke, he took out several items, all of which were immortal-grade treasures. The woman's expression changed slightly when she witnessed this scene. In the next moment, she bowed respectfully once more. Honored guest, come with me. As she spoke, she led Yi Xian to a room. As soon as Yi Xian sat down, a beautiful woman walked in. Based on her appearance, she seemed to be around 30 years old, and she had an exquisite and voluptuous figure that was extremely alluring. The beautiful woman walked over to Yi Xian and smiled. Young brother, are you going to auction those immortal artifacts or sell them directly to my treasure chamber of commerce? Yi Xian asked. Is there a difference? The beautiful woman smiled. If we auction them, then we can earn more. However, it takes time. If we sell them to you, then we can withdraw the money immediately. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. If I sell them to you, how much can a single immortal artifact sell for? The beautiful woman pondered deeply for a moment and said, an immortal artifact, 30 million violet origin crystals or 300,000 immortal crystals. Immortal crystals? Yi Xian gazed at the beautiful woman. What's that? The beautiful woman was slightly stunned and then she smiled. Immortal crystals are even more precious than violet origin crystals. Immortal crystals are condensed from violet origin crystals. Please continue to the next page if this chapter isn't finished. After absorbing spirit energy for over 10,000 years, there's a chance for it to be transformed into immortal crystals. These immortal crystals are extremely useful, and they're especially useful to creation realm experts. 300,000 immortal crystals. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, then I'll exchange them for immortal crystals. As he spoke, he flicked his finger and a spatial ring fell in front of the beautiful woman. Within the spatial ring were all the things he didn't need. Because he'd killed many creation realm experts all along the way and he'd taken all their belongings. Besides the creation realm weapons, he was prepared to sell everything else. Of course, he didn't choose to sell the god set because he still had a use for it. The beautiful woman glanced at Yi Xian's spatial ring, and it didn't take long for her expression to change. There were so many things within it that it slightly exceeded her expectations. The beautiful woman glanced at Yi Xian. Sir, please wait a moment. I'll get someone to estimate the value of these items. As she spoke, she passed the ring to an old man behind her. The old man took the ring, turned around and left. The beautiful woman walked over to sit in front of Yi Xian, and then she smiled. Sir, do you need anything else? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, do you have assassins? The beautiful woman was stunned. Yi Xian asked another question. I want to hire a few bodyguards. The beautiful woman had a slightly strange expression. Sir, you want bodyguards? Yi Xian nodded. It would be best if they're at the creation realm. Dao realm experts would be even better. The beautiful woman glanced at Yi Xian. If I'm not wrong, then you're probably from the sword sect, right? Yi Xian smiled. You're really well informed. I really am from the sword sect. However, I still want to hire a few bodyguards. The beautiful woman fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. You don't have any? The beautiful woman shook her head. I do, but it's very expensive to hire them. Yi Xian said, money isn't a problem. The beautiful woman was about to speak, but the old man who had left earlier returned. He walked behind the beautiful woman and after a while the beautiful woman looked at Yi Xian. Sir, the treasures in your spatial ring are worth a total of 530 million violet origin crystals. If converted to immortal crystals, it's 5 million immortal crystals. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The beautiful woman smiled and then she took out a spatial ring and passed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian took the spatial ring, and there were exactly 5 million immortal crystals within it. Moreover, the energy within these immortal crystals was much purer than violet origin crystals. Meanwhile, the beautiful woman said, Sir, you said you want bodyguards? Yi Xian put away the spatial ring and then he looked at the beautiful woman and smiled. Yes, of course, I want reliable ones. The beautiful woman smiled. My treasure merchant group is willing to do business with you. Yi Xian asked, Your treasure merchant group? The beautiful woman smiled. Creation realm experts or Dao realm experts. So long as you can afford it, we have them. Yi Xian asked, What's the price of a Dao realm expert? The beautiful woman pondered deeply for a moment and then she said, 1 million immortal crystals. 1 million immortal crystals. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. That's fucking expensive. The beautiful woman looked at Yi Xian. Do you want to invite them? Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. How's our reputation? The beautiful woman smiled. If our treasure merchant group's reputation wasn't good, then the sword sect and Win wouldn't have allowed us to open a merchant group here. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment and then he said, I'll invite 3 Dao realm experts. The beautiful woman shook her head. No. Yi Xian gazed at the beautiful woman and the latter smiled bitterly. Sir, we can only send one Dao realm expert. Xian asked. Why? The beautiful woman smiled. Less. Xian understood. It seems that even in the divine martial star field, Dao realm experts are very rare. Xian nodded. Then one. What about manifestation realm experts? Invite one. This chapter is not finished. Please continue to the next page. How much? The beautiful woman said, 300,000. Xian said, give me 10. Of course, I want the kind that doesn't need to be watered down. The beautiful woman glanced at Xian. Let's make this clear first. We will participate in the sword sect's internal conflict. Xian smiled. Don't worry, I'm not inviting you to help me deal with the sword sect's disciples. My sister is in Woon, and I need some people to protect her in secret. At this point he seemed to have thought of something and he said seriously, I think you should investigate me first, then decide if you want to continue working with me. The beautiful woman took a deep look at Xian, then turned to look at the old man next to her. The old man retreated and not long after the old man returned to the beautiful woman's side. A moment later the beautiful woman suddenly stood up. She looked at Xian with a serious expression. You? Xian smiled. Do you still want to work with me? The beautiful woman was silent. Work. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the door. Xian frowned because he did not sense anyone coming. He turned to look at the door and he did not know when a woman was standing there. The woman looked to be in her 20s, wearing a white dress, and her eyes were covered with a black ribbon. Seeing the woman, the beautiful woman and the old man behind her quickly bowed. Mississippi, the woman nodded. Young Master Yi, we can work with you. Not only that, we will send 2 Dao realm experts to protect your sister. Also, we will not charge young Master Yi anything. Xian said, conditions. The woman said, no conditions. Xian smiled bitterly, then I owe you a huge favor. When he spoke up to this point he looked at the woman. Miss, do you really think that my favor is worth so much? The woman said, young Master Yi does not have confidence in yourself? Xian smiled, I am worried for you. The woman said softly, if young Master Yi agrees, then from now on, our people will head to Wuyuan to protect your sister in secret. Xian was silent for a moment and then he said, thank you. The woman nodded. If young Master Yi needs anything in the future, you can come to my Tong Bao Chamber of Commerce. Xian cupped his fists. Thank you. I still have something to do, so I will take my leave. With that he turned and disappeared. After Xian left, the beautiful woman hurried to the woman. Miss? The woman said softly, I know that many people want him to die, including many forces that even our Tong Bao Chamber of Commerce does not dare to offend. The beautiful woman said in a low voice, then why do you still want to help him? The woman said, everyone wants him dead, but he is still alive until now. Do you think it is normal? The beautiful woman was silent. The woman said again, the treasure on him is not something we can have. Even if we get it, it will only bring disaster to us. Now that he is in trouble, if we help him secretly, we might have an unexpected harvest in the future. The beautiful woman said in a low voice, what if he dies? The woman asked in return, what if he does not die? The beautiful woman was silent. The woman said, we will gamble. If we win, we will have a powerful ally in the future. If we lose, we will not lose anything. The beautiful woman said in a low voice, Miss, how confident are you in winning? The woman said, not confident. The beautiful woman, the woman said softly, the lower, the less hope he has, the more I want to gamble. P.S. I have ordered some sword domain physical books. They are very domineering and beautiful. Everyone can follow my WeChat public account. Just search for the WeChat public account on Green Phoenix Peak and follow. Today the public account will post pictures of these physical books. They are really beautiful and they are all hardcover. These books are not for sale, only for free. End of this chapter. Chapter 524. Hearing the woman's words, the beautiful middle-aged woman was quite confused. Miss? However, the woman shook her head. There's no need to say anything else. With that she turned and left. The beautiful woman smiled bitterly. Young Miss Shi, the old man suddenly said, that young man is very strong. The beautiful woman looked at the old man. How strong is he? The old man said, if he attacks, then besides young Miss, No one in our Heavenly Treasures Chamber of Commerce can stop him. The beautiful woman was shocked. How is that possible? The old man sighed and didn't say anything before turning and leaving. The woman arrived outside the Chamber of Commerce and sat down on a stone bench. It didn't take long for two old men to appear behind her. The woman said softly, "Uncles, I'll have to trouble you two to take care of Yi Xian's little sister." The two old men nodded and then they turned and vanished. The woman said, "Young Master Yi, come out." As soon as she finished speaking, Yi Xian appeared nearby. Yi Xian walked over to the woman and smiled. "Young miss, you're amazing." The woman said softly, "Young Master Ye's concealment technique is amazing as well." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I still haven't satisfied you." The woman said, "Young Master Yi, are you worried that I'm plotting something?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'm indeed worried about you helping me without any conditions." The woman smiled. "Young Master Ye's worries are reasonable. However, I can tell young Master Yi that compared to young Master Ye's immortal crystals, I value young Master Ye's favor more." Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Thank you for thinking so highly of me." As he spoke, he hesitated for a moment before saying, "I want to buy some swords from you. It's best if they're immortal artifacts." The woman said, "How many?" Yi Xian thought about it and said, 20. The woman pondered for a moment before saying, "Young Master Yi doesn't have enough money." Yi Xian smiled embarrassedly. "Is 5 million immortal crystals not enough?" The woman shook her head. Treasures like immortal artifacts are very useful to Creation Realm experts. This was because if a Creation Realm expert had a celestial artifact, his strength would increase by at least 30%. As for the sword that young Master Yi wanted, it was one of the more precious immortal weapons. Even my Tong Bao Chamber of Commerce would find it difficult to gather 20 immortal-level swords in such a short time. Yi Xian's face sank. Meanwhile, the woman continued, "However, I can help young Master gather them. Moreover, I can even allow young Master to pay on credit." Yi Xian looked at the woman. "Miss, what are your conditions?" The woman said softly, "I want to see that treasure on young Master." Yi Xian was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "It's that simple?" The woman nodded. Yi Xian grinned and then he withdrew the pagoda. When she saw the Xiao Ta in front of Yi Xian, her expression changed slightly. After a short moment she said, "Young Master Yi, is there a separate space within the pagoda?" Yi Xian nodded. The woman asked again, "Can I go in and take a look?" As she spoke she said, "I was being rude." Yi Xian smiled and said, "There's nothing rude about it. If Miss wants to go in and take a look, you can go now." As he spoke, he directly sent the woman into the pagoda. On the first floor of the pagoda, the woman looked around curiously. Not far in front of her was Xiaoling. Xiaoling was looking at the woman curiously. The woman said softly, "No wonder." Beside the woman, Yi Xian asked, "What is it?" The woman shook her head slightly. "This item is really extraordinary. No wonder so many people want to obtain it." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Miss, you don't want it?" The woman shook her head. "If such a treasure falls into my hands, it will be a disaster for me." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "To me, it is a disaster." The woman smiled and said, "Then why does young Master Yi still keep it by his side?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I can't chase it away even if I want to." The woman nodded and did not ask any more questions. She looked at Xiaoling and said softly, "She should be the spirit of origin." Yi Xian looked at the woman with some surprise. This woman was not simple. At this time Xiaoling took out a fruit and handed it to the woman. The woman smiled and said, "Thank you." As she spoke, she put the fruit away. She hesitated for a moment, then took out a jade pendant and handed it to Xiaoling. This item should be useful to you." Xiaoling took the jade pendant. The jade pendant immediately emitted a white light and entered between Xiaoling's eyebrows. Yi Xian asked, "Miss, this is?" The woman said softly, "Young Master Yi, don't worry. This item is a spirit-locking jade pendant. It can lock her own spiritual qi and prevent it from leaking out. In this way her spiritual qi will not be wasted." Yi Xian looked at Xiaoling and said with a smile, "Hurry and thank Big Sister." Xiaoling looked at the woman and said in a clear voice, "Thank Big Sister." The woman gently rubbed Xiaoling and looked at Yi Xian. "Let's go out." Yi Xian nodded and left the prison pagoda with the woman. Outside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian looked at the woman. Miss Bai Ji. The woman said softly, young master, you can call me Bai Ji. Yi Xian smiled and said, Miss Bai Ji, I'll have to trouble you with the flying sword. After saying that, he flicked his finger and a storage ring landed in front of Bai Ji. Bai Ji put away the storage ring. Young master Yi, come find me here in 3 days. Yi Xian nodded. Thank you very much. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. After saying that, he turned around to leave. At this moment, Bai Ji suddenly said, Young master Yi. Yi Xian stopped and turned to look at Bai Ji. The latter asked, Young master Yi, why do you trust me so much? Yi Xian smiled and said, a straightforward person doesn't beat around the bush. I want to be friends with Mississippi. Bai Ji nodded slightly. Then we're friends. Yi Xian quickly said, then how much discount can I get when I buy things in the future? Bai Ji was slightly stunned, then shook her head and smiled. Is that your goal? Yi Xian laughed, turned around and disappeared. Bai Ji chuckled. What an interesting guy. As she said that, a scroll appeared on the stone table in front of her. The scroll recorded everything about Yi Xian. Naturally, she wouldn't help Yi Xian for no reason. After all, if she helped an ingrate, it would be too disgusting. At this moment, the beautiful woman from before appeared behind Bai Ji. She looked in the direction where Yi Xian left. Miss Bai Ji said softly, grandfather's time is coming to an end. Many forces are already rolling up their sleeves. If anything happens to grandfather, they will immediately attack our treasure trade union. The beautiful woman said solemnly, we can ask Wuyan and Sword Sect for help or others. Bai Ji shook her head. The weak will not have a good ending if they seek help from the strong. After saying that, she got up and left. After Yi Xian left the treasure trade union, he returned to Sword Sect. As soon as he returned to the Sword Sect, a young man appeared in front of him. The young man sized up Yi Xian. You're Yi Xian? Yi Xian nodded. The young man said, I'm from Wuhan. Yi Xian said indifferently, what's the matter? The young man sneered, you killed people in my wound, do you really think I? At this moment, a flying sword suddenly appeared between the young man's eyebrows. The young man's body stiffened, not daring to move for fear that his head would be hit by the sword. Yi Xian walked in front of the young man. What do you think you are? The young man said angrily, Yi Xian, do you think I? Suddenly, the sword pierced half an inch into the young man's eyebrows and a stream of blood spurted out. The young man quickly said, I just came to take a look, nothing else. Yi Xian nodded. You came to take a look, did you not bring a gift? The young man, Yi Xian asked again, no gift. The young man quickly said, yes, yes. As he said, he quickly took off his storage ring and handed it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian glanced at the storage ring. There were more than 3 million purple origin crystals in the storage ring. It could be considered a small fortune. Yi Xian put away the storage ring and said with a smile, brother, it's fine to come, but you gave me such a big gift. Sai, you're really too polite. The young man's smile was extremely unnatural. It's my duty, it's my duty. Yi Xian put away his sword and said with a smile, come and take a look in the future. After saying that, he walked to the side. The young man immediately heaved a sigh of relief. The next moment he turned around and ran. When the young man returned to Wuyan, his face was already covered in blood. In front of the statue in Wuyan, all the Wuyan disciples surrounded the young man, and the young man said somewhat crazily, that Yi Xian has gone too far. Not only did he humiliate me, but he also said that there's no one in Wuyan capable of defeating us every time he sees Wuyan disciples in the future. Hearing the young man's words, all the people present were instantly enraged, and someone said angrily, who does that Yi Xian think he is? How dare he humiliate Wuyan like this? Guofei, did you go to look for Yi Xian yourself and then you suffered a loss, so you're inciting everyone now? Bolsh *T. Have you forgotten that Yi Xian killed people in Wuyan? Now the disciples of the Sword Sect are laughing at Wuyan, saying that the disciples of Wuyan are all cowards. That's right. Now the disciples of Sword Sect in Wuyan have to lower their heads when we see them. It's so King frustrating. Kill Yi Xian. At this moment someone said. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. But in the next moment, countless people suddenly roared furiously, kill Yi Xian. Do all of you want to kill me? Suddenly, a voice resounded from the side. Everyone looked over and saw a man standing not too far away. It was Yi Xian. The expression of the young man who had run back earlier instantly changed when he saw Yi Xian, and he retreated repeatedly. Yi Xian glanced at them and smiled. Do all of you want to kill me? One of the disciples of Wu stood out and glared angrily at Yi Xian. So what if I do? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, do all of you want to gang up on me or fight me one-on-one? The disciple of Wu spoke furiously. Do we need to gang up on you? You. He hadn't finished speaking when a sword was suddenly pressed against the center of his forehead. The man's voice stopped abruptly. The surroundings instantly fell silent. Yi Xian glanced at the crowd and said, my sister is in Wu and so are my friends in Wu. To be honest, I don't want anything unpleasant to happen between me and Wu. As he spoke, he looked up at the martial arts hall and said, one person from Wu will fight me one-on-one. Let's settle the scores in one battle. What do you think? After a moment of silence, a voice suddenly resounded from the martial arts hall. Sure. As the voice resounded, a figure appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned when he saw this figure. You. Chapter 525. Of course Yi Xian knew this guy. Immerse. Immerse of the Moke clan. Seeing Yi Xian, Immerse was stunned. You? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He did not expect Immerse to join Wu. Immerse smiled and said, Brother Yi, you came to Divine Martial City too. Yi Xian nodded. Immerse was about to speak but soon he seemed to have thought of something and frowned. Brother Yi, Yi Xian smiled and said, let's exchange a few moves. Immerse glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Sure. Both Yi Xian and Immerse wanted to compete with each other. They wanted to have a good fight when they were in never-ending Starfield. Unfortunately, they did not have the chance. But now they had the chance. Fight. The two of them came to an arena in Wuyuan. The arena was huge, hundreds of feet wide. The entire arena was supported by an array that could withstand powerful forces. Some disciples of Wuyuan gathered around the arena. On the arena, Immerse looked at Yi Xian and said, Brother Yi, be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly attacked with his sword. A cold light appeared and the space cracked. Rumble. The entire arena suddenly shook violently. The two of them retreated instantly. In the process of retreating, two flying swords appeared in front of Immerse. At this moment, Immerse's body suddenly became illusory. The two flying swords slashed across but they hit the air. At this time, Immerse had already rushed in front of Yi Xian. However, he was greeted by a dot of sword light. Immerse punched. Force against force. Boom. As Immerse punched, Yi Xian's dot of sword light instantly shattered. At the same time, a fist went straight for Yi Xian's face. However, the fist instantly retracted. Because a flying sword had appeared at the back of Immerse's head. Immerse retracted his fist, turned around and punched again. Bang. Yi Xian's flying sword was forced to a stop. At this time, Immerse's expression changed. He turned around and suddenly closed his hands. This time, it directly merged into a single sword. Yi Xian suddenly twisted his right hand, but the sword did not move at all. Immerse's expression changed. He lightly stomped his right foot and flashed dozens of feet to the right. Immerse's expression slightly changed. His right foot lightly stomped on the ground and he dodged 100 feet to the right. However, before he could stop, the two flying swords slashed at him again. The flying swords were so fast that Immerse did not dare to be careless. He did not dare to be careless. He dodged backward again. He dodged backward again and dodged Xian's flying swords. Yi Xian was about to attack again, but Immerse suddenly disappeared. Immerse suddenly pulled out his sword and stabbed it to the right. Boom. The entire martial arts stage shook violently. In the next moment, two afterimages and two flying swords flashed across the martial arts stage. When the disciples of the martial institution saw this, they trembled in fear. Yi Xian and Immerse were too fast. They were so fast that they could not see them clearly. Especially Yi Xian's flying sword. The speed of this flying sword was extraordinarily terrifying. If it was used for a sneak attack. Thinking of this, many people felt their scalps tingle. In front of the martial arts hall, Wuyuan's dean He Liantian quietly looked at Yi Xian and Immerse. Behind him was Qin Shan. Qin Shan's expression was a little heavy. A moment later, He Liantian suddenly said, "How is it? Xianxia said in a deep voice. Both of them are very strong. Xiantian smiled. I didn't expect so many geniuses to come to the never-ending star region this time. Xiaowen, Lian Wanli, Yiling and Xia are all geniuses among geniuses. Hearing that, Xianxian's solemn face also revealed a trace of a smile. Not bad indeed. Xiantian shook his head. Not bad. These monsters are rarely seen in 100 years. Xianxian wanted to say something but stopped. Xiantian Tendo said, Speak. Xianxian said, Dean, there are so many monsters. Xiantian said softly, Are you afraid that they will cause internal strife? Xianxian nodded. None of them will submit to anyone, especially now that there are two factions in the Institute. One is the never-ending faction led by the never-ending Starfield, which is in Lanxiao, and the others. All the people from the never-ending Starfield have gathered around them. The other is the original geniuses of our Wuyuan, which is Changhao and the others. Because of Yi Xian, the relationship between these two factions is not very good. Xiantian was silent. Xianxian said again, Also, Shaowen and the others are too close to Yi Xian and our Wuyuan and the sword sect. Xiantian said with a smile. Then what do you think we should do? Xianxian was silent. Xiantian raised his head to look at the horizon and he said softly, You should know the relationship between our academy and the sword sect. We can compete with each other and even fight each other, but we can never kill each other. Why? Xianxian was puzzled. Xiantian looked at the statue below. There are two reasons. First, it is because of the ancestral master. When the ancestral master left, he left a message saying that he and the sword sect will be on good terms for generations. Second, whether it is the sword sect or our Wuyuan, both have their own trump cards. Unless there is a huge gap, neither of us dares to touch the other. Xianxian said, The one from the sword sect is very ambitious. Xiantian said with a smile, I know. Xianxian looked at Xiantian. Isn't the dean worried? Xiantian said softly, I want to see if the sword sect dares to touch our wound. Xianxian looked at Yi Xian and Xia. If our Wuyuan and the sword sect fight this Yi Xian and Shaowen, Xiantian said with a smile, look at it the other way around. This Yi Xian is a person who values relationships. If the sword sect sends him to deal with our Wuyuan, for example, to kill Shaowen and Xia, do you think he will? Xianxian was stunned. Xiantian looked down and said softly, The ones who should be worried are the sword sect. Now that our Wuyuan is full of talents, those from the sword sect will not be able to sleep. Then he turned and left. Xianxian was stunned, then said, Are you not going to continue watching? They haven't decided on a winner yet. Xiantian shook his head. Both of them haven't used their full strength, so it's impossible to decide on a winner. Xiantian disappeared as soon as he finished speaking. Xianxian looked down and shook his head with a bitter smile. Those two fellows. Just as Xiantian said, both Xia and Yi Xian hadn't used their trump cards. It would be very difficult for them to decide on a winner. On the arena, along with a huge explosion, Xia and Yi Xian suddenly separated, and this time the two of them didn't continue fighting. Because they knew that it was meaningless to continue fighting. Just now both of them were competing in basic skills. Xia walked over to Yi Xian and smiled. Your flying sword is much faster than it was in midnight. Yi Xian smiled. You're much stronger as well. Xia said softly, Have you forgotten about those grudges? Yi Xian shook his head. No. Xia nodded slightly. Star-Lord, the foreign domain, the Sky River Starfield, and the Southern Starfield are all recuperating now. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. The Star-Lord has already sent people to Divine Martial City. Xia looked at Yi Xian. For that treasure? Yi Xian nodded. Xia said, If there's a need, just let me know. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. There's something that I really need your help with. Xia said, Speak. Yi Xian said, My sister is in Wuyuan and they might target my sister. Xia nodded slightly. I will pay attention. Yi Xian said with a smile. Thank you. Xia said, You're welcome. Remember, if there's anything, inform me. Then he turned and left. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the martial arts hall, wondering how Yiling was doing. And Lanxiao had already told him that as long as Yiling came out of seclusion, he would bring her to see him. But now there was no news from Yiling. A moment later Yi Xian turned and left. Around them, those Wuyuan disciples looked at each other in dismay. Was the fight over? At this moment, A man suddenly landed in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian stopped. The man looked at Yi Xian. I don't know what relationship you have with him, but I feel that the fight just now was meaningless. Yi Xian nodded slightly. You want to start again, right? The man nodded. Yi Xian said, Can we start now? The man looked at Yi Xian and in the next moment he suddenly disappeared. The moment the man disappeared, a sword light suddenly flashed in the field. Boom. The sword light dispersed and the man retreated repeatedly. The man hadn't even stopped when two flying swords were pressed against the center of his forehead. The surroundings were perfectly silent. Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings. The enmity between me and Wun ends here. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Everyone in the surroundings was silent. After Yi Xian left Wuyun, he returned to the sword sect, and he'd just returned to the cottage where Yu Wuchen resided when a man appeared before him. The man wore a gray robe and a sword on his waist. The man sized up Yi Xian. You're Yi Xian who just joined my sword sect? Yi Xian nodded. You are? The man said, I'm one of the 6 swords of the sword sect, Broken Sword. Broken Sword. Yi Xian was slightly stunned and then he said, I've heard a lot about you. Broken Sword nodded. I heard you killed someone in Wun. Yi Xian was about to speak when Broken Sword spoke abruptly. Well done. Yi Xian was speechless. Broken Sword continued. Are you interested in going to Endless City? Endless City? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Where? Broken Sword said, a desolate starfield. There's a city there called Endless City and there are unique devil beasts there. You can obtain devil crystals by killing those unique devil beasts. Yi Xian shook his head. I have something to do so I won't be going. Broken Sword tapped with his finger, and a sword of command descended before Yi Xian. If you encounter disciples of Wuyun besieging you, you can send this command and we'll rush over immediately. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the horizon. Yi Xian glanced at the sword of command in his hand, smiled and then put it away. That broken sword from before was at the creation realm. The creation realm. Attaining the creation realm at such a young age, one had to admit that it was extremely terrifying. Right at this moment the space before Yi Xian suddenly trembled, and Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. In next to no time, a woman suddenly appeared before him. It was Bai Ji from Tong Bao Trading Company. Yi Xian was shocked. Miss Bai? Bai Ji said in a low voice, let's go. Yi Xian was puzzled. Miss Bai Ji, what do you mean? Bai Ji said, 6 Dao realm experts are in the sword sect now. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression instantly sank. Bai Ji said again, let's go immediately. The sword sect will definitely compromise. They definitely will. P.S. Many of you should have seen the physical book of Sword Realm yesterday. In my opinion, it's very domineering and beautiful. Chapter 526. Sword Sect's Compromise. Yi Xian frowned. Why are you so sure, Miss Bai? Bai Ji sighed. Young Master Yi, since you joined the sword sect, have you met the sword sect's sect master? Yi Xian shook his head. Since he joined the sword sect, apart from Yu Wuchen, he had not met any other sword sect's upper echelon. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's face turned gloomy. At this moment he also noticed that something was amiss. Bai Ji continued, the sword sect will definitely give up on you. Because your sword sect's sect master is very ambitious, and he won't offend the top forces outside, especially when there's a Wuyuan in Shenwu City. If the sword sect is targeted, Wuyuan will hit them while they're down. At that time the sword sect will be in a very bad situation. So the sword sect will definitely choose to give up on you. Yi Xian was silent. Bai Ji continued, 6 manifestation realm experts, and this is not their true strength. If you want to protect yourself and your friends and don't want to fall out with the sword sect, you must leave now. If you leave now, the sword sect will not be too ruthless. If you don't leave when they let you go or want to control you, you will be in a much worse situation than now. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, if I leave will they not target my friends? Bai Ji said softly, that will depend on Wuyuan's attitude. If Wuyuan is determined to protect your friends, they will not dare to act rashly. But if the one in Wuyuan is also ambitious. At this point she didn't continue speaking. Yi Xian said softly, unknowingly my situation has become so bad? At this time Bai Ji suddenly looked to the right and an old man appeared out of nowhere. This person was none other than Yu Wuchen. Yu Wuchen looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian's face darkened. Senior. Yu Wuchen said in a light voice, if you came a year earlier and were a core disciple of our sword sect, then perhaps they would protect you. But now they won't. Yi Xian was silent. Yu Wuchen sighed softly, it's not that they don't value you but they value something else. Moreover, you're in conflict with the sect's interests. Now follow this girl and leave the sword sect immediately. Yi Xian was about to speak when a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here. This person was the sword sect master, Li Xianfeng. Li Xianfeng looked at Yi Xian. You might not be able to leave for now. Yi Xian smiled. Are you going to hand me over? Li Xianfeng was about to speak when Yu Wuchen suddenly said, when has our sword sect ever bowed to anyone? Li Xianfeng shook his head. Martial uncle, this isn't bowing to anyone. Yu Wuchen sneered. Not bowing to anyone? Isn't handing over a disciple of your own sect considered bowing to anyone? Li Xianfeng said, he's not a disciple of our sword sect. His name has never been recorded in our sword sect's disciple register. Yu Wuchen smiled. Looks like you won't even give me face. Li Xianfeng said softly, Martial uncle, this is no small matter. If we're not careful, our sword sect will be listed as an enemy. Yu Wuchen looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Li Xuanfeng's eyes narrowed. At this time Yu Wuchen looked at Li Xianfeng. Do you think it's the same for the sword sect to hand him over or for him to be captured? Li Xianfeng was silent. Yu Wuchen continued, or are you saying that you also want that treasure? If that's the case, have you thought about the consequences if you get it now? Li Xianfeng was still silent. Yu Wuchen continued, does this kid have no background? My sword. Taking action against him now is akin to giving someone else's dowry. Li Xianfeng was silent for a moment, then looked at Yi Xian. Leave the sword sect. As for whether we'll be friends or foes in the future, it's up to fate. With that he turned and disappeared. At the same time, Li Xuanfeng's voice sounded again. Leave now. Yu Wuchen looked at Yi Xian. Let's go. Yi Xian bowed respectfully to Yu Wuchen. I'll remember senior's help in my heart. With that he looked at Bai Ji. The latter nodded slightly and crushed a talisman. In the next moment both of them disappeared. In the field Yu Wuchen sighed softly. He came to the statue in front of the sword sect's basilica. Below the statue there was a line of words. My sword sect will never compromise. Never compromise. Yu Wuchen looked at the statue in front of him. As he looked at it his eyes became blank. No one had seen this ancestral master. No one had seen the ancestral master of Wun. All they knew was that both of them passed by this place and accepted 2 disciples here. That was how the sword sect in Wuyun came into being. A moment later Yu Wuchen turned and left. In front of the sword sect's basilica, Li Xianfeng looked at the statue in the distance. Beside him stood an old man. The old man said in a deep voice, Sect master, why did you let Yi Xian go? Li Xianfeng said indifferently, Who said I let him go? The old man was slightly stunned. In the next moment he understood. The sword sect could not openly attack Yi Xian. If they did, their reputation would be tarnished. Secondly, even if the sword sect obtained Yi Xian's treasure, they would still be the target of everyone. In the dark, the old man said in a deep voice, Sect master, this person is strong. Li Xianfeng nodded. I know. With that he turned and left. The old man also left. On the other side in Wuyun. In a hall, the dean of Wun, He Liantian, suddenly said softly, He's really going to make a move. Beside him Qin Shan said in a deep voice, Against Yi Xian? He Liantian nodded. Qin Shan's face darkened. What is he thinking? He Liantian said with a smile, What else can he think? He wants to unify Shenwu City. No, his ambition is bigger. Qin Shan said in a deep voice, This person's ambition is not small. And the swordsman's combat strength is not weak. We have to be careful. In addition, Yi Xian's little sister is in Wuyuan. Those forces might target her. Not only that, I guess the sword sect might also use this opportunity to deal with Wuyuan. He Liantian said softly, It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. Qin Shan looked at He Liantian. How should Wuyuan deal with it? He Liantian said in a deep voice, We can't give up on Yi Ling. Qin Shan asked, Why? Xianxia said softly, because she is good enough. Not only that, if we give up on her, it's the same as losing Xiaoan and the others. They will think that Wu Yuan is incompetent. If Wu Yuan really gives up on Yiling at this time, then we are really incompetent. Qin Shan said in a deep voice, but if we don't give up our situation, Xianxia said with a smile, the sword sect compromised not because they are afraid of those forces, but because the sword sect has bigger ambitions. They want a lot. And my Wu, at least I don't have such big ambitions. I only hope that Wu Yuan can continue to exist forever. Speaking up to this point, he looked at the distant sky and said softly, ambition often means eternal damnation. From now on, you and old one should pay more attention. Don't let outsiders touch Wu Yuan. If there are people, kill them directly. Qin Shan nodded slightly. As if thinking of something, he said again, then Yi Xian, Xianxia said in a low voice, whether he lives or dies, it depends on his luck. Qin Shan nodded slightly, understood. Saying so, he turned and left. Shenwu City. Yi Xian and Bai Ji appeared at the entrance of Tong Bao Chamber of Commerce. Yi Xian looked at Bai Ji. Miss Bai Ji, thank you. Bai Ji shook her head. It's nothing. Yi Xian said, farewell. Saying so, he turned and left. Bai Ji suddenly said, are you afraid of dragging me down? Yi Xian nodded. If I continue to stay here, I will definitely drag you down. Your help this time is enough. Farewell. Saying so, he turned into a sword light and soared into the sky, brazenly leaving. Obviously, he wanted to tell everyone that Yi Xian had left Tong Bao Chamber of Commerce. After Yi Xian left, a beautiful woman appeared behind Bai Ji. She looked at the sword light in the sky and said softly, this guy is quite interesting. Bai Ji said softly, get our men to pay attention to those forces in the dark as well as the sword sect and Wu. The beautiful woman said solemnly, Miss, do you really want to be involved in this vortex? Bai Ji nodded. There might still be hope if I take a gamble. Otherwise, once Grandpa leaves, my Tong Bao Chamber of Commerce will become the meat of others. Saying so, she turned and left. In a certain courtyard. And Lanxiu stood in the courtyard looking up at the sky. No one knew what she was thinking. At this moment, Lian Wanli appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. She leaned on the wall beside her and smiled. That guy was kicked out of the sword sect. And Lanxiu nodded, I know. Lian Wanli smiled, what do you think? And Lanxiu said softly, don't do anything. Lian Wanli was surprised, why? And Lanxiu said, at this time he will be even more terrifying if he's alone. Lian Wanli thought about it and understood. Yi Xian was a swordsman, but he was also an assassin, a super assassin. If Yi Xian was alone, then he could hide in the dark. But if they were to make a move, then they would have no choice but to force Yi Xian to show himself. At that time it would be disadvantageous to Yi Xian instead. As if she thought of something, Lian Wanli said, his situation might not be good. And Lanxiu looked at the sky, tell little Nine and the others not to act rashly. Lian Wanli nodded, understood. Saying so, she turned and left. And Lanxiu looked at the sky and no one knew what she was thinking. Outside Shenwu City. When Yi Xian left the city, he caused a huge commotion, and it could be said that he left the city openly. Moreover, this was his goal. He wanted to tell everyone that Yi Xian wasn't in the Tong Bao Chamber of Commerce. Not long after he left the city, numerous powerful auras enveloped him. At the same time, the surroundings suddenly darkened and numerous black iron walls appeared around him. Formation. Yi Xian turned around and saw an old man holding a sword standing not too far away from him. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I never expected that the first to make a move would be the sword sect. The old man remained expressionless. How do you want to die? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, I don't want to die. Chapter 527. I don't want to die. The old man's face was expressionless. I'm sorry, this old man can't satisfy you. As soon as he finished speaking, the sword in his hand suddenly left its sheath. Accompanied by a sword howl, a ray of sword light drew a beautiful arc in the sky and slashed straight at Yi Xian. This sword strike was like a bolt of lightning. Not only was it swift, but it also carried a sword aura that could destroy the heavens and the earth. And it seemed like it could split the heavens and the earth apart. Dao Realm. As soon as the old man attacked, Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn. The sword sect actually sent a Dao realm expert to deal with me. Yi Xian didn't dare be careless, and he charged forward swiftly and slashed down with his sword in both hands. This slash tore everything apart, and then a sharp and ear-piercing sound suddenly resounded. Bang! As soon as Yi Xian's sword slashed down, he instantly retreated explosively by over 1 kilometer. However, 2 flying swords had silently appeared in front of the old man. The old man's face was expressionless as he stabbed left and right with his sword. In an instant, the 2 swords that Yi Xian had condensed from sword insight were directly shattered and transformed into nothingness. The old man took a step forward and pointed at Yi Xian from afar. Over 1 kilometer away, the space in front of Yi Xian suddenly split open, and then a cold light appeared. Yi Xian didn't retreat but advanced instead, and he drew his sword and slashed down fiercely. Draw the sword to decide life and death. This was his strongest close combat sword technique at this moment. As soon as this sword slashed down, a sword howl instantly shook the surrounding space. When Yi Xian's sword collided with the ray of sword light, he instantly felt a powerful force spread throughout his body, and he started to retreat explosively. Moreover, he felt like his body was about to collapse at this moment. What a powerful force! After retreating 300 m, Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, and then he suddenly stomped his right foot and raised his sword with both hands. Bang! The ray of sword light in front of him shattered, but the shattered ray of sword light blasted him back 300 m again. After he stopped, Yi Xian's entire right hand was trembling. Moreover, he felt like his internal organs were roiling. Powerful strength. Yi Xian held his sword tightly. Was this a Dao realm expert? In the distance, the old man looked at Yi Xian calmly. He did not speak but pointed at Yi Xian through the air. The sword in his hand suddenly flew out like a bolt of lightning. The sword sliced through space and slashed towards Yi Xian. Everywhere it passed, the space within a radius of several hundred feet was annihilated. The power of this sword was enough to destroy heaven and earth. Dao realm expert. This time Yi Xian truly witnessed what a Dao realm expert was. This was not something a blessed realm elite could compare to. Yi Xian still didn't use his trump card. This time he wanted to see his limits. Yi Xian kept the soul-suppressing sword in his hand and clasped his hands together. In an instant many flying swords flew out. However, these flying swords were still unable to block the old man's sword. At this moment, the sword had already arrived in front of Yi Xian. Behind this sword was a long spatial rift. Yi Xian suddenly shouted angrily and stabbed with his sword. This attack didn't just contain speed and strength, it also contained sword intent. Moreover, his current sword intent wasn't on the same level as it was in the past. After being enhanced by his sword intent, the might of his attack had more than doubled. He stabbed with his sword. Bang! The space in front of Yi Xian instantly collapsed, but it returned to normal in the blink of an eye. At this moment Yi Xian had already retreated 300 m away. As soon as he stopped, the space behind him instantly collapsed. Moreover, a wisp of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly slashed down with his sword. The 2 flying swords that had arrived in front of him were instantly shattered. However, in the next moment Yi Xian suddenly appeared above him. Yi Xian suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to determine life and death. Draw the sword to determine life and death that was enhanced by 2 types of sword intents. The sword slashed down. Bang! A ray of dazzling light erupted in front of Yi Xian, and Yi Xian was pushed over 1 kilometer back in practically an instant. However, the old man's sword had been forcefully blasted flying. After he stopped moving, Yi Xian wiped off the blood from the corner of his mouth and spoke in a slightly frenzied manner. How exciting! The old man gazed at Yi Xian. I have to say that you really are not bad. As he spoke, he opened his palm and a sword appeared in his palm. In the next moment, monstrous sword energy appeared here. Yi Xian roared with laughter. Geezer, I think you're not bad as well. As he spoke, a powerful strand of energy suddenly appeared within him. At the same time, a dragon roar resounded. Dragon soul. Dragon energy. Yi Xian's aura instantly rose explosively as he was enhanced by dragon soul and dragon energy. Moreover, he'd even activated Moke energy. 3 types of energy. Earlier, he'd wanted to experience his limits, so he hadn't utilized these trump cards. But now he was going to risk his life. If he continued to conceal his trump cards, then he wouldn't be testing his limits, he would be giving his life away. The old man frowned slightly when he saw Yi Xian's aura rise explosively. In the next moment the sword in his hand suddenly flew forward, and it was even swifter than a bolt of lightning. In the distance Yi Xian thrust his sword out. Bang! The old man's sword was forcefully stopped by Yi Xian's sword. This time, Yi Xian had merely moved less than 3 m back. The old man's eyes instantly narrowed when he witnessed this scene. Suddenly he raised his sword to block Xianxi's attack. Bang! 2 flying swords slashed against the old man's sword. The old man took a few steps back and he'd only just stopped when a few more flying swords slashed towards him. The old man frowned slightly and swung his sword forcefully. As he slashed out with his sword, a wave of sword light surged out like a volcanic eruption. Before the flying swords could even reach him, they were directly shattered. Meanwhile, the old man's expression suddenly changed. Because Yi Xian hadn't continued attacking him, and Yi Xian had turned around and destroyed the formation with a single swing of his sword. After Yi Xian had destroyed the formation with one sword strike, he was already thousands of feet away in an instant. Run. He naturally had to run because he wasn't confident in his ability to kill the old man. So wasting time with the old man here was extremely unwise. The old man didn't pursue Yi Xian when he saw Yi Xian destroy the formation, and he immediately concealed himself. He'd come to kill Yi Xian in secret because the sword sect didn't want others to know about it. But now Yi Xian had destroyed the formation. So if he continued attacking, then others would definitely find out. At that time, even if he killed Yi Xian and seized the precious treasure, the sword sect would still become the target of public criticism. Yi Xian had caused quite a commotion when he fled. So many experts were rushing over from the shadows. A voice resounded from where Yi Xian fought the old man. Someone has made a move. Pursue Yi Xian with all your strength. Don't let others succeed first. As soon as he finished speaking, a wave of ripples appeared in the space here. After Yi Xian escaped, he came to a deep mountain. He used the chaotic energy to hide himself completely. However, he was still a little worried. So he immersed his consciousness into his body and asked, "Senior, is there any way to hide me so that even experts in the Dao realm can't find me?" A short while later, the voice resounded, "The energy you possess is sufficient." Yi Xian shook his head. "I was still noticed by others just now." The voice said, "That's because you didn't utilize it properly." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Please provide me with your guidance, Senior." The voice said, "Control your energy, let it spread throughout your body and become one with it." Yi Xian hurriedly did as he was told, and soon the chaotic energy spread throughout his body. A short while later, Yi Xian discovered that he was faintly discernible. Yi Xian was confused. "Senior, what's this?" The voice said, "Your energy is born from chaos and it is one with the chaos of heaven and earth. If you become one with it, you will become one with the chaos of heaven and earth. Apart from a few special people, ordinary people won't be able to detect you. Of course, you can't make a move during this period. If you do, your energy will spread and others will be able to detect you." Yi Xian asked, "Senior, can the chaotic energy only be used to conceal energy?" The voice said, "Of course not. It can purify the body and your body is slowly changing right now. You just haven't sensed it yet. The energy's effect on you is continuous, and it can continuously purify your body. In the end, you will discover its true benefits." Yi Xian asked again, "Is there anything else it can do?" The voice said after a moment of silence, "In your heart, am I omniscient?" Yi Xian. The voice said, "Next time when you ask me a question, can you ask something more profound? This kind of question is really low level." Yi Xian hesitated for a second. Then he asked, "Sir, do you think these strong people I've met are very weak in your eyes?" The voice didn't answer but asked in return, "The one below me, the one on the 5th floor, seems to be an emperor?" Yi Xian nodded. "He said he's an emperor. But I don't understand what that means." The voice said, "An emperor means that he has proven his Dao. Do you understand what it means to prove your Dao?" Yi Xian. "Is it the great Dao of authentication?" The voice said after a moment of silence, "Is that bullshit?" Yi Xian. The voice said, "The so-called Dao is the ultimate truth, source, rules, principles, realms and so on. Dao gives birth to all things, Tao exists in all things and exists in all forms in nature. Tao, this word contains countless rules. What we know is Tao, what we don't know is Tao. Proving Tao is to transcend, to constantly sublimate, to find the source of all things, to achieve eternity. That guy on the 5th floor, he achieved this so he can be an emperor. Xian was silent for a moment, then asked, "Is Tao the highest point?" The voice said, "Of course not. For us, proving Tao is just the beginning. Tao is divided into 4 realms. Initial awareness Tao, past Tao, present Tao and future Tao." Xian asked again, "What about above?" The voice said after a moment of silence, then said, "It's the legendary Tao breaking. Being in Tao, you are restricted by Tao. If you break Tao, you will achieve eternity." Xian asked again, "What about the Tao breaker?" The voice said after a moment of silence, "Now, I'll allow you to ask some low-level questions." Xian. P.S. Today is the 1st, brothers. There must be a lot of guaranteed monthly votes, asking for monthly votes. Asking for support. Thanks. Chapter 528. Xian chuckled sheepishly. "Senior, what do you mean by Tao breaking?" The man suddenly asked, "What's your current realm?" Xian replied, "I'm almost at ethereal opening." The man said, "So it's ethereal opening. I thought you'd already attained Tao breaking." Xian was stunned. "What do you mean, senior?" The man said flatly, "Why are you blindly going to the Tao breaking realm if you don't even understand your current realm? Did you eat too much?" Xian was speechless. The 6th person added, "You can see further, but it's more important to walk the path you're walking on." Xian nodded. "I understand." Just as the man said, the most important thing for him right now was to tread the path he was on. What Tao breaking or Tao proving? That was too far away from him. As if he'd thought of something, Xian asked, "Senior, the swordsman I encountered just now was a Tao realm expert as well. How is this Tao realm different from the Tao proving you mentioned?" The man was silent for a moment before he said, "I don't know what the Tao realm is either." Xian was speechless. Xian didn't waste any more time with the man, so he left the mountain range stealthily. As soon as he left the mountain range, his expression changed abruptly because several auras had appeared above him. "They noticed me?" Xian didn't show himself and he was still hiding in the shadows. Meanwhile, several consciousnesses swept over his position. Xian's face fell and he was ready to attack at a moment's notice. But it didn't take long for the consciousnesses to vanish. 3 people had appeared above him without any warning, but they hadn't noticed him. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man. It was the leader of the sword sect, Qin Xianfeng. There was an old man with a sword by his side. Xian knew the old man as well. It was the old man he'd fought earlier. There was a tall and sturdy man with a huge sword on his back by his side. In the air, Qin Xianfeng scanned the surroundings. "There's no aura," the old man said. "His concealment technique is formidable indeed." The burly man suddenly asked, "Why did old he fail?" Qin Xianfeng also looked at the old man. The old man said in a low voice, "This person's strength is extraordinary." Qin Xianfeng frowned. "So strong that even old he couldn't kill him instantly?" The sword-hugging elder shook his head. "If we were to fight, he would naturally be no match for me. Even if I wanted to kill him instantly, I wouldn't be able to do it. Of course, if I disregard everything and pursue him, I'm confident that I can kill him." Qin Xianfeng shook his head. "We can't let the world know that our sword sect attacked him. Otherwise, even if we kill him and obtain that treasure, those powers in secret will join forces against our sword sect. At that time, it would be extremely disadvantageous to our sword sect." The old man nodded slightly. "It's precisely because of this that I didn't dare to chase after him." The man with a sword on his back suddenly said, "Then what should we do now?" With that, he and the sword-bearing elder looked at Li Xianfeng. Li Xianfeng smiled. "There's no rush. There are others who are more anxious than us." As he spoke, he looked towards Shenwu City. "That Xian's friends and younger sister are in Wuyuan. This time I want to see if that fellow He Liantian will compromise." The old man said in a low voice, "What if they don't compromise?" Li Xianfeng smiled. "Those people won't compromise on Xian's matter. If Wuyuan doesn't compromise, then it means that they will fight those powers. At that time our sword sect will reap the benefits." The sword-bearing elder said in a low voice. What if he's willing to compromise? Qin Xianfeng replied indifferently, then Wen will have to give up on those monstrous geniuses. Not only that, but Wu Yuan's prestige in the hearts of those students will plummet. No matter what he chooses, it will be beneficial to our sword sect. The old man suddenly said, the sect's founding ancestor has decreed that the sword sect and Wen will be friends for generations. Qin Xianfeng replied softly, the times are changing. As he spoke, he raised his head and looked towards the horizon. My sword sect will absolutely not hide within this city forever. After a while the three of them left. Below, Yixian's face was dark to the point it was terrifying. This sword sect leader's heart was not just ordinary viciousness. After a while Yixian suddenly disappeared. He had returned to Shenwu City once more. An eye for an eye. He was not angry that the sword sect did not want to protect him. After all, they did not owe Yixian anything and had no obligation to protect him. However, the sword sect had sent people to kill him and even plotted against his friends and younger sister. That was Yixian's enemy. As for enemies, he would either kill them on the spot or let them die a horrible death. Yixian did not openly seek revenge on the sword sect. He had not overestimated himself to such an extent. He knew very well what his advantages were. Yixian snuck into the sword sect, and his target was the sword sect's Divine Sword Pavilion. The so-called Divine Sword Pavilion was the sword sect's treasury, and many of the sword sect's weapons were stored here. Yixian arrived at the Divine Sword Pavilion. There were no guards at the entrance, so he quietly snuck in. After entering, he saw swords everywhere. There were more than 100 swords in sight, and all of them were of high quality. And these swords were all inside the light pillars. In the dark, Yixian's face sank. Needless to say, if he touched these light pillars, many sword sect's experts would appear before him. But fortunately, these light pillars couldn't stop him. Space Dao Law. To a certain extent, the Space Dao Law was the natural counter to these formations. Because so long as these formations were within space, then he could use the Space Dao Law to break them with ease. Yixian circulated the Space Dao Law, and it didn't take long for all the swords within the light pillars to vanish. However, the light pillars were still unharmed. Yixian didn't stop and went to the second floor. There were comparatively fewer swords on the second floor, but they were all immortal artifacts and there were an entire 36 of them. The corners of Yixian's mouth curled up slightly, and he put the swords away before going to the third floor. There were only 3 swords on the third floor, but all of them were at the creation realm. Yixian didn't spare them a second glance, and he directly utilized the Space Dao Law to put them into the prison pagoda. After that he went to the third floor. There was only a portrait on the fourth floor. On the portrait there was a sword with a sheath. Yixian was stunned when he saw this sword. A moment later, a sheathed sword appeared in his palm. He'd obtained this sword from a sect called the Sword Sect with the Emperor Hound, and he hadn't been able to draw it back then. So he'd kept it in the prison pagoda all this time. What exactly is this sword? What's the relationship between this sword sect and those 2 sword sects that he'd encountered earlier? He had a lot of questions. Yixian gazed at the sword in his hand. It seemed to be sealed within it because he was able to sense that it wanted to come out but couldn't. Yixian didn't think too much about it and was just about to leave when there was movement from below. Yixian's expression changed and he hurriedly merged into space and didn't dare move. Meanwhile, a panicked voice suddenly resounded from the first floor. There's a thief. As soon as the voice resounded, numerous formidable auras appeared in the surroundings of the sword pavilion. In the dark, Yixian did not dare to move at all. Meanwhile, Qin Xianfeng suddenly appeared on the 4th floor, and the old man with the sword in his arms was there as well. Qin Xianfeng glanced at the surroundings and remained silent. The old man spoke solemnly. Who did it? Yixian? Qin Xianfeng spoke softly. Who else could it be? The old man frowned slightly. How did he do it? Qin Xuanfeng's face remained expressionless. Who knows? The old man spoke solemnly. He probably hasn't gone far. I'll go take a look around. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished. Qin Xianfeng turned around and left as well. Suddenly the 4th floor fell silent. Just like that, around an hour later, Qin Xianfeng appeared once more, and he glanced coldly at the surroundings before vanishing. 2 hours later, Qin Xianfeng appeared once more. He scanned the surroundings once more, but there was nothing around him. After a moment of silence, he spread his divine sense, and it didn't take long for it to cover practically the entire fourth floor. However, he still didn't notice anything. Qin Xianfeng withdrew his divine sense, turned around and left. This time Yi Xian walked out. He walked up to the painting, left a line of words and then turned around to leave. After some time, some sword sect elders came to the fourth floor, and when they saw the line of words on the ground, their faces turned extremely ugly. A moment later, Qin Xianfeng also came to the fourth floor, and when he saw the line of words below the painting, he narrowed his eyes. The line of words was, "Qin Xianfeng, you fool, I'm right in front of you and you can't even see me. Are you blind?" A moment later, Qin Xianfeng spoke indifferently, "What a good Yi Xian. I'd like to see how long you can last." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and the line of words on the ground disappeared. After leaving the sword sect, Yi Xian didn't leave Shenwu City. To him, the most dangerous place would be relatively safer. Not only that, but he also had to be on guard in case those people attacked Yi Ling and the others. Yi Xian found an abandoned courtyard in the city, and he sat cross-legged in the room. This time he obtained 3 manifestation swords from the sword sect, and a total of 36 immortal swords. There were also more than 60 sage swords. It was a huge profit. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian quickly took out the sheathed sword. Yi Xian asked, "Senior, do you know about this sword?" The sixth replied, "I don't." Yi Xian asked again, "Then do you know what's so special about this sword?" The sixth was silent for a moment and then said, "This sword is sealed." Yi Xian quickly asked again, "And then?" The sixth replied, "And then it's a sword." Yi Xian was struck dumb. "What else?" The sixth replied, "And it's not a very long sword." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Is this guy playing with me?" At this time the sixth suddenly said, "Throw it in." Yi Xian quickly threw the sword into the world prison pagoda, and a moment later the sixth replied, "You want to pull out this sword?" Yi Xian nodded. The sixth replied softly, "This sword is very destructive, especially against the harmony of heaven. It's best that you don't pull it out, otherwise you will be rejected by heaven and earth." Yi Xian. Chapter 529. Rejected by heaven and earth. Yi Xian was confused. "Senior, what sword is this? Why is it so special?" The sixth replied, "I don't know what sword it is, but it's no ordinary sword. The lethality of this sword was extremely great. This lethality did not only refer to its power, but it also had a great restraining effect on the laws and origin of the world. Once this sword is used, it will be rejected by heaven and earth or even targeted." Yi Xian hesitated. "What will happen if I'm targeted by heaven and earth?" The sixth replied, "Nothing much, you'll just get struck by lightning from time to time." Yi Xian. The sheathed sword appeared in front of Yi Xian. The sixth replied, "This sword is too powerful and its killing intent is too strong. It's not something you can control right now." Yi Xian nodded. "Looks like I can't use this sword for now." The sixth replied, "Also you need to be vigilant at all times. Don't let yourself develop a bad habit of relying on external things. Once you rely on them, you'll neglect your own development. As time goes by, you'll realize that you're nothing but external things." Yi Xian nodded. "I've learned a lot. Relying on external things." Even though he kept reminding himself not to rely on external things, there were many times when bad habits were formed unknowingly. This was the scariest. After Yi Xian sheathed his sword, he seemed to have thought of something. He asked again, "Sir, what do you think I lack now?" The sixth replied, "Time." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I know I'm lacking time, but what I'm saying is, what do I lack in terms of cultivation?" The sixth replied, "Foundation and accumulation." Yi Xian frowned. "Foundation? Accumulation?" The sixth replied, "A great Confucian of the mortal world not only needs to be knowledgeable, but also experience the vicissitudes of life and the fickleness of human nature. Only then can one become a great master and form his own school. The so-called foundation is the sword Dao you've learned and the sword Dao you know. Right now, the number of sword techniques and thoughts you've learned can be counted on one hand. As for experience, you're only 20 years old. What kind of life experience do you have to speak of?" Yi Xian was silent. The sixth floor continued. "The word, sword, is all about enlightenment. And this enlightenment is the Dao. The Dao encompasses all things. Do you understand?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I don't really understand. The sixth master said, do you know how the old man with the sword was stronger than you? Yi Xian asked, where? The sixth house replied. That's what it means to have a solid foundation. His sword moves are grand and contain the magical laws of heaven and earth. But your sword only has speed and power and a bit of intent. That's not enough. Yi Xian nodded slightly. I understand. The person on the sixth floor said, these can't be rushed. Yi Xian asked, then what should I do now? The sixth replied, speed and strength. Yi Xian was taken aback. Senior, didn't you say strength and speed? One sword breaking all techniques. The person on the sixth floor suddenly said, have you heard of this saying before? Yi Xian nodded. I've heard of it. The person on the sixth floor said, the strength of swordsmen lies in their swords. They can break the laws, rules, and even Tao laws. What you need to do now is to focus on strength and speed and intent. When your speed surpasses this world, you will realize that all laws and Tao laws are like floating clouds in front of you. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Listening to senior's words is worth 10 years of cultivation. The person on the sixth floor said calmly, do you know what I did in the beginning? Yi Xian asked, what did you do? The person on the sixth floor said, when I was young like you, I was a teacher. Unfortunately, the ways of the world are unpredictable. I walked the path of cultivation, but I never thought I would reach the peak of our world. Sigh, how troublesome. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. Darn it. Why did that sound so uncomfortable? The person on the sixth floor said softly, actually, I envy you. Yi Xian was confused. Envy me for what? The person on the sixth floor said, that girl with the surname and likes you, right? Yi Xian, the person on the sixth floor said, back when I was still a teacher, I also liked a girl. At that time when I was with her, I felt that everything was beautiful. Unfortunately, one day she told me that she didn't want to live an ordinary life. She wanted to live a life that was respected by thousands of people. So she married the dean of our school. My life fell into a low point. Then I obtained a treasure and rose to power. I beat the dean, and the girl I liked begged me for forgiveness in the end. In the end, I reached the peak of my life. The more Yi Xian listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. The person on the sixth floor said softly, most of the time life is very melodramatic. If a man has no strength, he will live worse than a dog. Yi Xian nodded. He agreed with the person on the sixth floor. Although reality was cruel, there were still kinship, love, and friendship. He believed that even if he lost his cultivation, Yiling was still his sister, and Mo Yunqi and Lanxiu and the others were still his friends. These feelings would not change because of anything else. Yi Xian did not continue chatting with the person on the sixth floor. He looked at the 3 swords in front of him. 3 swords of fortune. However, he felt that these 3 swords were slightly inferior to the soul-suppressing sword and the divine king sword. Therefore, he did not plan to keep them for himself. Devour. If he devoured these swords, he would definitely be able to greatly increase his realm. However, he could not devour them now. If he devoured them now, he would definitely cause a huge commotion. Now that there was no one to protect him, he would definitely die. At this moment, the space in front of him trembled slightly. Soon, Baiji's voice appeared in front of him. 6 Dao realm experts have entered Wuyuan. You must be mentally prepared. Ping. Yi Xian suddenly stood up. Obviously, those people could not find him, so they started to pressure Wuyuan. They wanted to use Yiling and the others to force him to show himself. Yi Xian said solemnly, Miss Baiji, can I trouble you to continue to investigate for me? Baiji said, this time this matter was planned by the Sword Sect. Their goal is not only to target you but also Wuyuan. Moreover, they seem to be looking for you in the dark. You must be careful. Also, don't go to Wuyuan. As far as I know, Wuyuan has no intention of giving up on Shaoan and the others for now. Yi Xian's face was gloomy. He naturally could not pin his hopes on Wuyuan. This matter still depended on himself. As if he thought of something, Yi Xian asked, is the Sword Sect leader Li Xianfeng in Wuyuan? Baiji said, yes. Yi Xian nodded, turned around and left. His target was the Sword Sect. This matter was planned by the Sword Sect, and the Sword Sect did not want others to know that they were targeting him. Therefore he had to make it bigger. He could not let the other party become a whore and then build a chastity memorial arch. Wuyuan. Inside the martial arts hall, Helian Tian sat at the head of the table with 7 people sitting on both sides below him. 6 old men and the sword sect leader Qin Xianfeng. Helian Tian smiled. You came to my Woon to ask Woon to hand over little sister Yi Xian? Qin Xianfeng remained silent and only drank his tea. Opposite of Qin Xianfeng, a black-robed old man looked at Helian Tian. Dean Helian, we have always respected Woon. This time, our goal is only that Yi Ling. Helian Tian smiled. Do you know that Yi Ling is a student of my Woon? The black-robed old man glanced at Helian Tian and spoke indifferently. Dean Helian, this old man will not beat around the bush. We must take Yi Ling and the others. Helian Tian looked the black-robed old man in the eyes. Are you threatening me? The black-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly, and the atmosphere here instantly became tense. Meanwhile, an old man suddenly appeared at the entrance to the hall. He wore a white robe and his white hair was tied into a ponytail. Even though there were many wrinkles on his face, he emanated an extremely formidable, imposing aura. Qin Xuanfeng's expression instantly changed when he saw the white-robed old man. He was the previous dean of Wuan Wu Wen. Wu Wen gazed at the black-robed old man, and then he took a step forward. The black-robed old man's expression instantly changed drastically, and then he vanished on the spot in the next moment. A breath of time later, the black-robed old man returned to where he stood earlier. However, there was a wisp of blood on the corner of his mouth, and his arms were trembling violently. The expressions of everyone here became extremely solemn when they witnessed this scene. Moreover, the black-robed old man's eyes were filled with fear. Wu Wen glanced at Qin Xianfeng. When did the sword sect lower its head to anyone all those years ago? When did the sword sect play such tricks? You've completely thrown away the sword sect's thousands of years of pride and reputation. Qin Xuanfeng's face remained expressionless, and he was just about to speak when Wu Wen waved his hand. A swordsman like you isn't qualified to speak to an old man. As he spoke, he glanced at the black-robed old man and the others. My Woon has no intention to participate in the struggles of the mortal world, nor do we have such great ambition to dominate Divine Martial City. However, we won't fight and we will absolutely not allow others to bully us. Since those kids have joined my Woon, then they're students of my Woon. Touching them is equivalent to touching my Woon. When he spoke up to here, a wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of his mouth. You've attained the Dao realm at any rate, yet you're actually using the friends of others to threaten them. Even this old man feels ashamed for all of you. The expressions of everyone here became extremely unsightly because this was a slap to the face. However, none of them dared to say anything. Wu Wen's strength was clearly stronger than them. Moreover, they were in Wuyuan right now. If Wuyuan utilized all its strength, then it was entirely possible for it to make them stay here. Meanwhile, Wu Wen suddenly said, Are all of you still not going to fuck off? Could it be that you want the old man to keep all of you for a meal? The black-robed old man and the others didn't say anything else and they just turned around and left. They didn't even leave behind a single threatening word. They weren't stupid. They were clearly weaker than Qin Xianfeng, yet they still threatened him. Wasn't that no different from courting death? Qin Xianfeng was about to leave as well. Meanwhile, Wu Wen gazed at him once more. If you and your disciple wanted to dominate Divine Martial City, then you could have just openly challenged my Wuyan to a battle. If you won, then my Wuyan wouldn't be a sore loser. But now all of you are playing tricks and the old man is looking down on all of you. You're truly a disgrace to the founding ancestor of your sword sect. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Qin Xuanfeng's expression was extremely unsightly. He Liantian smiled and said, Brother Qin, don't be angry. Master is a straightforward person and he likes to speak the truth. Don't take it to heart. Qin Xianfeng almost went berserk. P.S. Asking for votes. Thank you for the gifts and support from all my friends yesterday. Thank you, everyone. I'm fortunate to have all of you along the way. I'm grateful to all of you. Chapter 530. Li Xianfeng glanced coldly at He Liantian and was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. He immediately stood up and transformed into a ray of light that vanished outside the hall. Li Xianfeng and Qin Shan exchanged glances, and there was a trace of bewilderment in their eyes. Why did Li Xianfeng leave in such a hurry? He Liantian spoke in a low voice. Send someone to investigate later. Qin Shan nodded and said, they won't let this matter rest. He Liantian fell silent. Qin Shan asked again, what do you plan to do? He Liantian spoke in a low voice, we've already fallen out and I'm afraid they'll go to extremes. Tell Shaoan and the others not to leave the city. No, not to leave Wuyun. Qin Shan nodded and was about to leave. However, He Liantian spoke again, pass down my order. Tell everyone in Wuyuan to return immediately. Besides that, you and the revered elders must be on guard at all times to prevent any sneak attacks. Qin Shan nodded, I understand. As he spoke, a cold smile arose on the corners of his mouth. Let me see if they dare to openly come to Wuyun to kidnap people. As soon as he finished speaking, he swiftly vanished from the hall. He Liantian remained silent on the spot, because he had a feeling that this matter wasn't so simple. After Li Xianfeng left, he immediately returned to the sword sect. When he returned to the sword sect, his expression instantly turned extremely unsightly. Because the spirit energy in an area of 500 kilometers around the sword sect had completely vanished as if it had been sucked dry. Spirit energy had dried up. Presently, the spirit energy in the sword sect had dried up completely. Meanwhile, an old man with a sword in his hand appeared by Li Xuanfeng's side. Li Xuanfeng's expression sank. Yi Xian did this? The old man spoke in a low voice. It should be him. Li Xianfeng glanced at the surroundings. None of us in the sword sect noticed him? The old man shook his head. The spirit energy suddenly vanished. We immediately searched the surroundings but we found nothing. Li Xianfeng narrowed his eyes. How did he do it? Could it be that supreme treasure? The old man spoke in a low voice. His strength and natural talent are at the top even in our sword sect. If he doesn't die, then he'll definitely become a calamity to our sword sect in the future. Li Xianfeng fell silent for a short moment before he said, send the order. Yi Xian stole a precious treasure of my sword sect. From this moment onward, all disciples of my sword sect are responsible for killing him. The old man looked at Li Xianfeng hesitantly. This. Li Xianfeng spoke indifferently. If we don't do that, then our sword sect won't be able to act against him openly. Only then will we be able to stand on the side of justice. The old man fell silent for a moment before he turned around and left. Li Xianfeng's face turned cold. You want to play? Then I'll play with you. With that, he turned around and disappeared. The sudden disappearance of the sword sect's spirit energy quickly spread throughout Shenwu City, but it didn't take long for another piece of news to suppress it. Yi Xian stole the sword sect's supreme treasure. Who was Yi Xian? The people of Shenwu City weren't familiar with this name because Yi Xian hadn't been in Shenwu City for long. But now, after the sword sect made an announcement, the people of Shenwu City looked down on Yi Xian to the extreme. Stealing from a sect and a swordsman at that was beyond embarrassing. Moreover, many students in Wuyuan City were taking pleasure in Yi Xian's misfortune. In short, the sword sect could be said to be standing at the peak of morality. In a shabby room, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and his face was slightly pale. When he used the Divine King's throne before, his body couldn't bear it. The Divine King's throne was his only Dao realm divine artifact, and he still couldn't fully control it. Not only that, he had decided to use it less in the future. At this moment, the sixth floor suddenly said, your chair isn't bad. Yi Xian was curious. Why? The sixth floor said, this item contains a Dao law, and this Dao surpasses the Dao law of your star field. Yi Xian was curious. There are Dao laws in our star field too? The sixth floor said, every world has its own Dao laws. Without Dao laws, the world will be in chaos. For example, when you fight with someone and destroy the space will repair itself. That's the Dao law. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, if the Dao laws of this world are destroyed, does that mean the world will be destroyed? The sixth floor said, you want to do that? Yi Xian shook his head. Destroy the world? He wasn't that crazy. The sixth floor said, Dao laws aren't that easy to destroy. For now, you need to be as strong as the fifth floor to destroy the Dao laws of a world. Yi Xian smiled. Senior can do it too, right? The sixth floor said, keep a low profile. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian stopped talking to the sixth floor and focused on absorbing the immortal crystals. An hour later, Baiji's voice sounded in front of him. A moment later, Yi Xian's face turned cold. Not only did the sword sect want to kill him, but they also wanted to stand on the side of justice. It made sense. The sword sect had built up a reputation in Shenwu City for so many years, they wouldn't want to lose it just like that. Xian stood up and walked outside. The sixth floor said, I have a small suggestion. Xian stopped. Senior, please speak. The sixth floor said, leave this place and come back in 10 years. No one here will be your match. Xian shook his head. He knew that he was at an absolute disadvantage now. Leaving was definitely the best choice. However, he knew that once he left, those people would go after Yiling and Shaoan. If he ran, his friends and brothers would suffer. The sixth floor said, then are you going to fight them to the end? Xian chuckled. Senior, can you come out? The sixth floor said, don't even think about it. I can't even protect myself. Xian was confused. Why do you say that? The sixth floor said, before the swordsman left. At this point he suddenly stopped talking. Xian figured it out when he heard that. Before the swordsman left he attacked the sixth floor. Without thinking too much Xian disappeared. This time he didn't go to the sword sect but to Tongbao Chamber of Commerce. In a private room Baizhi was sitting in front of a desk reviewing something. Suddenly she looked up at the corner. Young Master Yi? Xian appeared quietly, his face solemn. You can still detect me. After he concealed himself with the chaotic qi, even a Dao realm expert couldn't detect him. But as soon as he arrived, Baizhi found him. Baizhi smiled. Young Master Yi, don't be surprised. I can sense young Master Yi because I'm a little special. Xian smiled bitterly. Luckily I didn't make you my enemy, Baizhi. Otherwise I wouldn't even have a place to hide. Baizhi flicked her finger and a storage ring fell in front of Xian. Xian glanced at the storage ring. It was full of fairy artifact swords. Baizhi was about to speak but suddenly her expression changed. Oh no, leave. Xian was slightly stunned. In the next moment he turned around with the intention of leaving. However, right at this moment, the entire Heavenly Treasures Chamber of Commerce suddenly exploded, and a powerful force blasted towards Xian and Baizhi. Xian suddenly appeared in the sky above Baizhi. The next moment he thrust the sword in his hand upward. Boom. A sword cry shook the sky. Boom. The powerful force shattered but Xian fell to the ground. At this moment, 6 old men appeared around him. 6 Dao realm experts. Next to Xian, Baizhi said softly, I'm sorry, I should have known that they would set up an ambush here. Xian shook his head. It has nothing to do with you, I was careless. In the air, the black-robed old man looked down at Xian. Xian, do you see that there are 6 Dao realm experts by your side? Xian looked at the black-robed old man. The latter said, the 6 of us don't want to push things too far, we just want the treasure you have. Hand it over and we will leave immediately. We will not harm your life. Hand over the treasure. Xian grinned. Have you forgotten what happened to the Star Lord? Have you forgotten what happened to the never-ending starfield? Hearing this, the black-robed old man's expression darkened. Are you threatening us? Xian shook his head. I'm just telling you that the treasure is good, but it will cost you your life. The black-robed old man said indifferently, the 6 of us know that you have people behind you, you can call them out. If we lose, we will not mention the treasure again. Just as Xian was about to speak, the 6th person suddenly said, why are they so arrogant? Before Xian could answer, the 6th person said again, they are clearly so weak, why would they challenge the people behind you? Xian, the 6th person sighed, actually, it is understandable, I did many things that I overestimated myself in the past. If I had turned and ran when I encountered this tower, I would not have ended up like this. Xian asked, Senior, why didn't you run back then? The 6th person said softly, at that time I was already invincible, a broken tower. Why should I be afraid? However, as soon as the battle started I regretted it. Actually, it is not wrong to be low-key most of the time. Sigh, what a painful realization. Xian. At this moment the black-robed old man in the sky suddenly said, Xian, I will give you one last chance. If you don't hand over the treasure, don't blame us for being rude. Xian was silent. The black-robed old man said again, the sword sect will not care about you. When will not care about you, the current you is all alone, you have no chance of winning. Who said so? At this moment, a voice came from not far away. Xian turned to look. A man was slowly walking over. Seeing this person, Xian was stunned. This person was Wuxia of the Moke clan. Wuxia walked to Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Brother Imo, there is no need for you to get involved in this." Wuxia looked at Yi Xian. "You don't treat me as a friend?" Yi Xian looked at Wuxia. He said with a smile, "Of course Brother Imo is a friend, but..." Wuxia shook his head. "Since we are friends, why say so much?" Yi Xian was silent. Chapter 531. Friend. Yi Xian's heart felt rather warm. Because Wuxia's ability to step forward at a time like this meant that Wuxia had really taken Yi Xian as a friend. Dao Realm. 6 Dao Realm experts. Even if he and Wuxia joined forces, they still had no chance of winning. But Wuxia had still stepped forward. In midair, the black-robed old man looked down at Wuxia with an expressionless face. "You're an extraordinary genius as well. Why sacrifice your life for others?" Wuxia smiled. "You don't have to worry about that." The black-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly and he was just about to attack. However, 2 women suddenly appeared by Yi Xian's side. Zhou Xian and Xianxia. The black-robed old man glanced at Xianxia and the others with an icy cold expression. "Since all of you want to die, then this old man will fulfill your wish." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. At the instant that the black-robed old man vanished, the 5 people behind him vanished as well. 6 against 4. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "I'll fight too." As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. Fight 2 Dao Realm experts? How? Yi Xian wasn't confident, but he knew that he had to fight too. Otherwise, the pressure on Xianxia and the others would be enormous. Yi Xian immediately utilized the Dragon Soul, Dragon Energy and Emoku Energy. With the boost from the Dragon Soul and Dragon Energy, Yi Xian's aura rose explosively. Yi Xian charged straight at one of the gray-robed old men. His goal was to kill one person first. He had to kill one person first. Yi Xian held the soul-quelling sword in his right hand. At this moment he'd raised his speed to his limits. The gray-robed old man laughed coldly when he saw Yi Xian charge at him. He didn't retreat, but he charged at Yi Xian instead. An instant later, Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. The gray-robed old man smashed his fist forward. This punch shook the heavens and earth. The gray-robed elder's fist landed on Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword. In an instant, Yi Xian was sent flying with his sword. The gray-clothed old man was just about to follow up with another attack when his expression changed drastically. Because he actually felt his soul vanish at this moment. The gray-robed old man was horrified. He hurriedly placed his palm on his chest in an attempt to suppress his soul. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly slashed at the gray-robed old man from afar. Soul separation. As Yi Xian's voice fell, the soul-suppressing sword in his hand trembled violently, and a strange force instantly enveloped the gray-robed old man. The gray-robed elder's expression changed drastically as he roared, "No!" As soon as he finished speaking, his other hand suddenly pressed against the space between his eyebrows in an attempt to suppress his soul. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly clenched his left hand. Slash. As soon as he finished speaking, a drop of blood silently transformed into a ray of sword light on the gray-robed old man's right fist where the soul-suppressing sword had cut open earlier, and it pierced through the gray-robed old man's forehead. The gray-robed old man's body stiffened as countless amounts of blood sprayed out. The moment the blood appeared, it actually transformed into rays of sword light that instantly slashed the gray-robed old man's body. God Blood Technique. This was his other trump card that he hadn't used earlier. But at this moment he had no choice but to use it. Because if he didn't use it, he wasn't confident in his ability to kill his opponent. Nearby, the gray-robed old man was directly sliced into pieces by the swords condensed from blood. However, the gray-robed old man's soul was still there. However, his soul had become completely illusory. Before his physical body collapsed, he could barely suppress Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword and the soul-suppressing sword's soul fragment. But now that his physical body had collapsed, he couldn't suppress his soul any longer. From the beginning to the end of the battle between Yi Xian and the gray-robed old man, only 2 breaths of time had passed, and it was during this time that the gray-robed old man had perished. On the other side, the black-robed old man who had intended to attack Yi Xian was stunned, instantly killing a Dao Realm expert. Did Yi Xian do this? His mind was blank at this moment. It wasn't just the gray-robed old man. Even Li Xianfeng and the others who were hiding in the dark had expressions of disbelief on their faces. Even though Yi Xian had utilized all things, they couldn't kill a Dao realm expert. Moreover, it was an instant kill. That was a Dao realm expert. The old man with the sword in his arms spoke solemnly. We still underestimated his combat strength. Li Xianfeng nodded. We can't underestimate him in the future when we fight him. Fearful. Even he was fearful at this moment. Yi Xian had such formidable combat strength at such a young age. If he was given more time. Thinking of this, Li Xuanfeng's eyes gradually turned cold. On the other side, Wu Yuan's Dean He Liantian was also shocked. Clearly, he hadn't expected Yi Xian to kill a Dao realm expert in an instant. Behind He Liantian, Qin Shan said softly, "This person is indeed a monster." He Liantian said softly, "If Shaowen and the others are in danger, be prepared to act at any time." Qin Shan asked, "What about Yi Xian?" He Liantian shook his head, "We can't save him. If we save him, there will be endless disasters." Qin Shan nodded. Right now Yi Xian was like a huge whirlpool. Even Wen didn't dare to step into this whirlpool. The price would be very, very high. In the distance the battle was still going on. And Lanxiu Lian Wanli and Mo Xia were fighting 4 Dao realm experts, and the 3 of them were directly suppressed from the beginning. Although the 3 of them were super monsters, Dao realm experts weren't cabbages. They were the top experts in this world. It wasn't that there weren't people who wanted to surmount realms to challenge Dao realm experts, but it was very rare. Moreover, they were fighting with numbers. And Lanxiu and the others naturally couldn't defeat them. It was already extremely terrifying that they weren't directly crushed. On the other side, the black-robed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment he was both shocked and furious. Yi Xian's instant killing of the gray-robed old man had truly shocked him. Because Yi Xian hadn't even reached the myriad arts realm yet. This couldn't be described as terrifying. Yi Xian glanced at Lanxiu and the others. When he saw them being suppressed, Yi Xian's face sank. He gripped his sword tightly in his right hand and walked towards the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly when he witnessed this scene. Besides killing intent, there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. At this moment he didn't look down upon Yi Xian any longer. Yi Xian held his sword tightly in his right hand while strands of formidable aura surged out incessantly from within him. Moreover, the soul-suppressing sword in his hand was emanating an extremely powerful aura. With the boost from the dragon soul, dragon energy and Moku energy, Yi Xian's aura was comparable to a Dao realm expert. Right at this moment, the black-robed old man in front of Yi Xian suddenly took a step forward, and then he smashed his fist forward. He decided to make the first move. Because Yi Xian was gathering force. As soon as the old man smashed his fist forward, the entire space in the surroundings started to seethe like boiling water. It was an extremely shocking sight. Especially when a formidable force arrived in front of Yi Xian. As this formidable force pressed down upon him, Yi Xian suddenly felt the surroundings fall silent. At this moment he couldn't even breathe. Yi Xian suddenly clenched his left hand tightly. And then a strand of powerful dragon energy instantly surged into his right hand. A moment later he slashed forward with his sword in hand. A dazzling ray of golden light slashed down in a straight line. Bang! The space in front of Yi Xian was obliterated while Yi Xian was blasted back repeatedly. This time he retreated by over 1 kilometer. However, the black-robed old man retreated by over 100 m as well. He just stopped when 2 flying swords silently slashed towards him. The black-robed old man's gaze was icy cold as he pressed his right hand down lightly. Defend! As soon as he spoke, an invisible barrier appeared around him, and the 2 flying swords were instantly shattered. Suddenly Yi Xian appeared in front of him, and then a sword stabbed towards the center of the black-robed old man's forehead. The black-robed old man clasped his hands together and directly blocked Yi Xian's soul-subduing sword. However, his expression changed drastically in the next moment. He quickly let go of the soul-subduing sword and retreated rapidly. Yi Xian's sword was a soul-subduing sword. The moment the black-robed old man's hands touched the soul-subduing sword, he was shocked to find that his soul seemed to be separated from his physical body. As soon as the black-robed old man retreated, Yi Xian stabbed towards the black-robed old man from afar. Soul-subduing. As soon as Yi Xian's voice fell, the soul-subduing sword in his hand shook violently, and a mysterious force instantly enveloped the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man's expression changed drastically because that was how Yi Xian had killed the gray-robed old man. At this critical moment he suddenly pressed his hands against the center of his forehead, and at the same time he turned around and roared, "Stop him!" Hearing the black-robed old man's words, a Dao realm expert gave up on Immerse's group of 3 and turned around to charge at Yi Xian. Yi Xian had no choice but to give up on the black-robed old man. He turned around and slashed down with his sword. Buzz! The sound of a sword's cry shook the sky. Then an earth-shattering explosion resounded. Rumble! Yi Xian retreated hundreds of meters with his sword in hand. The Dao realm expert didn't attack Yi Xian again. Instead, he retreated to the black-robed old man's side and placed his hand on the black-robed old man's shoulder. A moment later, the black-robed old man gradually stabilized. The black-robed old man looked up at Yi Xian, and the seriousness in his eyes had turned into fear. "Be careful of the sword in his hand." Sword. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword technique and the soul-subduing sword could already kill Dao realm experts. Because he had the support of the dragon soul, dragon energy and Moku energy. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth. He glanced at Xianxia and the other 2. Xianxia and the other 2 were currently 3 against 3. After it became 3 against 3, Xianxia and the other 2 were no longer at a disadvantage. However, Yi Xian was very well aware that it wouldn't be beneficial for them if this continued, because his body was starting to feel uncomfortable. After all, the dragon soul and dragon energy weren't permanent. Moreover, there were others watching from the surroundings like the sword sect. He had to end this quickly. Yi Xian looked at the black-robed old man and Moku. He gripped his sword tightly in his right hand and was about to attack. However, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared at the side. It was Li Xianfeng. Li Xianfeng glanced coldly at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, my sword sect took you in out of kindness and taught you sword techniques and sword Dao. However, I never expected that you would steal a treasure from my sword sect. Your actions are undoubtedly cruel and unscrupulous. You're worse than a pig or a dog." A sword appeared in his hand when he spoke up to this point, and he continued, "Although you're heartless, I can't be unjust. Kill yourself and I can guarantee that you'll have an intact corpse and reincarnate. P.S. I'm writing the story and it will be available to everyone soon. Finally, I'll give you a spoiler. The owner of the prison pagoda has appeared in the sword domain. Did anyone guess it?" Chapter 532. The black-robed old man glanced coldly at Li Xianfeng. Li Xianfeng can't sit still any longer when he sees that Yi Xian is about to fall. The black-robed old man turned around and gazed at the others who were fighting in Xianxia and the others. It didn't take long for them to stop and return to his side. Xianxia and the others returned to Yi Xian's side. Xianxia spoke softly, "Let's go." Yi Xian laughed bitterly. All 4 of them could leave but he couldn't. Meanwhile, Li Xianfeng suddenly gazed at the black-robed old man and smiled. "Brother Yilan, he's a traitor of my sword sect. I hope Brother Yilan won't interfere in the matters of my sword sect." The black-robed old man called Yilan spoke indifferently. "Brother Li, don't tell me that the precious treasure in his possession belongs to your sword sect as well." Li Xuanfeng's eyes narrowed slightly and he was about to speak. However, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Don't all of you want it? I'll give it to all of you." As soon as he finished speaking, a black Xiaota suddenly appeared between his brows, and then the black Xiaota appeared above him. As soon as the black Xiaota appeared, an invisible pressure suddenly appeared in the surroundings. At this moment, even Dao realm experts felt a strand of formidable pressure. At this moment, the expressions of everyone here had become solemn. Li Xianfeng stared fixedly at the black Xiaota, and his eyes were filled with undisguised greed. He Liantian was gazing at the black Xiaota as well. There was no greed in his eyes, only a solemn expression. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Don't all of you want it? I'll give it to all of you." As soon as he finished speaking, he led Xianxia and the others back by around 30 m. Yi Xian spoke via voice transmission, "All of you return to Wuyun right now." Lian Wanli gazed at Yi Xian and Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Listen to me." Lian Wanli and the other 2 looked at each other. Without hesitation, the three of them turned around and left. After the three left, Yi Xian looked up at the sky. This is a supreme treasure of the universe. I, Yi Xian, do not have the fortune to enjoy it. Today I will give it to all of you. The treasures of heaven and earth belong to the virtuous. With that, he turned around and disappeared. No one chased after Yi Xian. Even Li Xianfeng ignored Yi Xian. The gazes of everyone had converged onto the world prison pagoda. They did not suspect that Yi Xian was faking it because they could sense that this world prison pagoda was extraordinary. Although everyone knew that this was a treasure of the world, it was strangely quiet at this moment. No one made a move. The atmosphere was very strange. In the dark, Qin Shan, who was next to He Liantian, was confused. What game is that Yi Xian playing? Could it be that he really knows how to adapt to circumstances? He Liantian shook his head. I don't understand. Qin Shan said solemnly, should we fight for it? He Liantian shook his head once more. Qin Shan was confused. Why? He Liantian said softly, so what if we get it? Do you think you'll be invincible if you succeed? Qin Shan said in a deep voice, this item is not simple if we obtain it, Heliantendo. Disaster. If we get it, it will bring disaster to Wu Yuan. Don't talk too much, just wait and see. Qin Shan nodded and said nothing else. Not too far away, Yi Lan suddenly broke the silence. Brother Li, does your sword sect also want this item? Li Xianfeng looked at Yi Lan and smiled. Truth be told, this is the sword sect's lost item. Yi Lan did not get angry. Instead he laughed. Sect Master Li, it's rare to see someone as thick-skinned as you. Li Xianfeng said indifferently, everyone, this is divine martial city. Yi Lan narrowed his eyes. Sect Master Li, are you? If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Are you threatening us? Li Xianfeng shook his head and smiled. Of course not. Brother Yi Lan, Yi Xian is a traitor of the sword sect. This item is also a lost item of the sword sect. Don't you think it's a little unreasonable for you to try and take it by force? Yi Lan sneered. An item of the sword sect? Sect Master Li, the old man has now realized that your skin is extraordinarily thick. Don't talk to this old man about these useless things. If you want this treasure, you'll have to defeat the old man and the others. He was about to make his move when an elderly man carrying a sword suddenly appeared behind Li Xianfeng. Apart from him, there was also a burly man carrying a sword on his back who appeared not too far behind Yi Lan and the others. 3 swordsmen. Yi Lan narrowed his eyes and the corners of his lips curled into a sneer. With just the 3 of you? Li Xianfeng smiled. Keep watching. Just as Li Xianfeng had spoken, 2 black-robed men suddenly appeared on his right. Each of them held a sheathed black sword in their hands. Apart from that, they also carried a black sword case on their backs. 2 Dao State swordsmen. Yi Lan's expression sank at the sight of this. 5 swordsmen against 5 of us. We have no advantage at all. Besides, this is the sword sect. The sword sect must have a trump card. After all, the sword sect's legacy has been passed down for so many years. They can't possibly only have this little trump card. Yi Lan's expression was extremely ugly. Is the duck that's already in our mouths going to fly away just like that? Li Xianfeng smiled. Brother Yi Lan, do you still want to fight? Yi Lan glared coldly at Li Xianfeng. What a great sword sect. Very well, we'll meet again. He then turned around and left. Soon Yi Lan and the others disappeared from sight. They cannot fight. If the 5 of them were to fight, there was a high chance that the sword sect would make them stay here forever. After all, the swordsmen were extremely powerful to begin with. On top of that, this was the sword sect's territory. They had no chance of winning here. The old man next to Li Xianfeng said in a deep voice, they won't let this go so easily. Li Xianfeng replied coldly, what's there to be afraid of? He then turned to look at He Liantian. Brother He, you don't have any other plans, do you? He Liantian stepped forward and smiled. I don't have any other plans. Congratulations on obtaining the universe's #1 treasure. Li Xianfeng glanced at He Liantian and smiled. Thank you. Then he grabbed the world prison pagoda with his right hand and disappeared. Soon all the sword sect's experts left. He Liantian frowned as he looked at the sword sect. No one knew what he was thinking. Qin Shan said in a deep voice, they got it just like that? He Liantian shook his head. It's not that simple. Xianxia smiled bitterly. They have already obtained it. If they obtain its power at that time, our wound, Xiantian suddenly asked. What do you think of Yi Xian? Xianxia was slightly startled, then asked, What do you mean? Xiantian said softly, Intelligence. Xianxia said in a deep voice. He's not stupid. Xiantian said softly, That's it. From his information, not only is he not stupid, but he's also very cunning. No matter what, let's wait and see. Then he turned around and left. Xianxia glanced at the sword sect's direction, then turned around and left as well. In another corner, Bai Ji quietly looked at the sword sect. No one knew what she was thinking. When the battle started, Yi Xian told her to leave so she was not injured. A moment later. This chapter is not finished, please continue. Bai Ji turned around and left. At the sword sect. After Li Xianfeng returned to the sword sect with the World Prison Pagoda, he immediately entered his own training room. Looking at the World Prison Pagoda, Li Xuanfeng's eyes were filled with passion. He was a Dao realm expert, but this treasure could still make him feel a powerful pressure. What did this mean? It meant that the level of this treasure was far beyond his realm. Rumor had it that this treasure was the only way to the fifth dimension, and the fifth dimension was a whole new universe, a whole new world. Li Xianfeng could not wait to subdue the pagoda in front of him. With a point of his finger, a drop of essence blood fell on the World Prison Pagoda. The World Prison Pagoda trembled, and the next moment the World Prison Pagoda suddenly burst out with a dazzling black light. Li Xuanfeng's expression changed drastically, and the next moment he was sent flying. At the same time, the entire training room turned into nothingness. A moment later, Li Xianfeng, who was not far away, stood up from the ground. At this moment, half of his body was destroyed. Li Xianfeng was stunned, then quickly reconstructed his body. For an expert of his level, regrowing a severed limb was undoubtedly a very simple matter. However, in the next moment he was stunned. Because his body could not be restored. Eternal destruction. Li Xianfeng hurriedly tried a few more times, but he was still unable to restore his lost body. As if he had thought of something, Li Xianfeng hurriedly looked towards the World Prison Pagoda. However, it was completely empty. He ran. Li Xianfeng was stunned for a moment, and then his expression instantly became ferocious as he roared furiously like a wild beast. No. At this moment, his face had lost its previous composure, and there was only ferociousness and madness. He ran. Meanwhile, the old man and the others appeared by Li Xuanfeng's side, and they were stunned when they saw Li Xianfeng. Li Xianfeng suddenly roared furiously, Find him. Use everything we have to find Yi Xian. We must find him. The old man and the others exchanged glances, and then they turned around and left. Li Xuanfeng's expression was so ferocious that his features were twisted. No, he only had half his face right now. Yi Xian. A roar resounded from the sword once more. Yi Xian sat cross-legged in a certain courtyard within Divine Martial City and was healing himself. At this moment his face was pale as a sheet and his entire body was covered in cracks. Moreover, his clothes were dyed red with blood. Utilizing the dragon soul and dragon energy from before had consumed too much of his energy. If he were to continue fighting, then he wouldn't even have to die. Even though the dragon soul and dragon energy were good, they were too strong and his body couldn't endure it right now. He madly devoured immortal crystals. As energy surged endlessly into his body, Yi Xian's body started to absorb it madly, and his complexion gradually became better. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief when he noticed this. It's good that I can recover. Suddenly the space in front of him collapsed. Yi Xian was shocked, and he was about to attack when a black object appeared in front of him. Yi Xian's expression instantly became strange when he saw it. The World Prison Pagoda. The pagoda in front of Yi Xian trembled slightly, and then it transformed into a ray of black light that entered the center of his forehead. Yi Xian's body trembled and then he shook his head and sighed, What exactly do you like about me? I'll change, alright? End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.